The following program is an MLWRadio.com production.
Ooh, that kitty sounded dangerous and delicious at the same time. Hey folks, Dave Silva here, and we are 24 hours away from Prichard's Dirty Dozen. This is an exclusive event for only 12, that's right, 12 listeners of Something to Wrestle With. All you have to do is jump on to facebook.com/something to wrestle to find out all the details on how you can be a part of this special event. Now let me tell you one thing, in this event, you'll get 3 hours with Bruce and Conrad. Ask them all the questions you want. Take all the pictures you want. Just have a blast. This is going to be a great experience for you, the fans, so don't let it pass you by. Jump on to facebook.com/something to wrestle for more details and secure your spot now.
And now a moment from the Something to Wrestle With archives. Episode 6, Brawl for All.
Throw it in the Google machine.
No, yeah.
Brawl title now.
That's not a real.
Steve Dr. Death Williams in his day was one of the toughest men walking the face of the earth.
There's lots of rumors and innuendo that he's supposed to walk through the competition and then be programmed against Stone Cold Steve Austin for a big payoff at a fight.
First of all, Doc was already under contract. And no, this was not a part of the deal to bring Doc in. Russo, I think, looked at it as a way to introduce Doc. Doc was a badass. So Bart calls me and says, well, I get in trouble when I knock him out. Bart's word. And I said, I promise you will not get in trouble. And of course, I hang up the phone and I go in and I let JR know, and JR laughed and thought that it was ridiculous that Bart would think that. Vince loved it, thought it was great, wanted to see it, and we all saw it.
This moment from Episode 6, Brawl for All, and much, much more is available in the archives of Something to Wrestle With, Bruce Prichard.
Welcome to Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard.
Well, you know, that's not a rib. She booted. No, yeah, there's no box of gimmicks.
Rumor and innuendo.
I don't deal in rumor and innuendo. And was he there? I was there. I don't give a shit. I ain't scared.
I ain't scared of shit.
Fuck him.
You, Bruce.
I love you take the double cheeseburger, you take the gravy, well, you know, and then double man, you know, it's called chicken salad. Double onion,
You're nothing but an egg-sucking dog.
Throw it in the Google machine.
Goddamn, kid. God damn it. What the hell show you got there? I need more. Yeah.
What say you?
Pronouns, pal.
and now something to wrestle with. Con Bruce Prichard.
The second most recognizable athlete in the entire world today.
Conrad Thompson.
What happened when? What would Vince say about that?
Well, hey, Vince, tell me, my shoulders look good tonight. Yeah. They're so big. Yeah. Let's go.
Bullshit.
Welcome to Wrestle.
Brawl title now.
Welcome to Something to Wrestle With.
Something to wrestle with.
Something to wrestle with. Bruce Prichard. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard. Bruce, what's going on, man? How are you?
Welcome, world traveler, man. Just getting home and glad to be back in the United States, but had a great time overseas with all my good friends over in Dublin in England. So, man, we had a blast.
Well, we're going to have a blast this weekend, too. If you haven't already, cruise on over to livenation.com, Philadelphia. We're coming to see you this Sunday. We've got something cool planned, an extreme guest, if you will. We're going to be at TLA, the Theater of Living Arts, right there in Philadelphia. Just before WWE puts on Battleground, you can come see Bruce and I, have some drinks, have some laughs. You're going to have a blast, and you can pick up tickets right now at livenation.com, and tickets are only $35, right, Bruce?
Oh, hell yeah. We've even got some VIP still available, but most important, make sure that you come out and see us live this Sunday in Philly, man. It's going to be a blast.
And you might even want to cruise on over to our Facebook right now. Dave Silva has put together something kind of cool. We get lots of questions about, hey, what do you guys do the night before the show? well, you can actually come hang out with us. We did this with Tony in Dallas. It was a huge hit. Everybody who attended had a blast, and you'll have a blast if you'd like to join Bruce and I this Saturday night. You'll get to come eat dinner with us, have some drinks, and we can talk about all the things we can't talk about on the podcast. Get all the details right now over at our Facebook. It's facebook.com/something to wrestle. And you'll also see next week's poll is on Facebook. So cruise on over if you haven't already. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/something to wrestle. And you'll see our new poll posted right now. Stay tuned to the end of the show, and we're going to give you an opportunity to preview what we might cover next week. But before we get to next week, or even this week, let's talk about last week. Bruce, what was your feedback on the show we did last week?
You know, overall, I think that the majority of the feedback that I got was people saying that we left out the match between Barry Darsow and Crush that we talked about on the show. So that was the overwhelming response that I got back. Hey, you guys forgot to talk about that the Repo Man and Crush wrestled each other. And we talked about that on the podcast. Go back and listen to it because we certainly did address it.
Well, anything else you want to go ahead and put a bow on regarding Demolition? Because that was our topic last week. One of the most requested topics we ever had. Demolition won the poll, and I think most everybody was a fan of Demolition's gimmick, the music, the paint. It was an iconic thing if you're a little kid like I was. Demolition was hard to beat, and that is available in our archives right now. Anything else you'd like to touch on for Demolition?
Nothing other than Demolition was definitely not a Road Warrior ripoff, and there, end of story.
Well, let's start a new story, and we're going to have lots of stories that we can't tell here on the podcast, and you can actually participate. Go pick up tickets right now, livenation.com, Philadelphia. We're coming to see you this Sunday, the 23rd at 2 o'clock. Tickets are only $35. You're going to have a blast, and you can get great seats right now at livenation.com. But don't take my word for having a good time.
Philadelphia, this Sunday.
Something to Wrestle with, Bruce Prichard.
Live.
I thought it was so worth it.
Something to Wrestle with live show is even better in person.
The show was really funny.
Something to Wrestle with Live is coming to our Philly fans this Sunday, July 23rd at Theater of the Living Arts at 2 p.m.
I recommend coming to any live show.
I haven't laughed that hard in a while.
See Bruce Prichard and Conrad Thompson live and in living color, with plenty of time to head out and see WWE Battleground. You never know what they're going to talk about, and there may be a surprise or two planned as well. Come see us live July 23rd, this Sunday at 2 p.m. at Theater of Living Arts in Philadelphia.
It was so great.
It was a great experience.
For tickets and info for this or any other Something to Wrestle with live event, go to facebook.com/something to wrestle. That's facebook.com/something to wrestle. Hope to see you there.
We had a really good time.
All right, Bruce, let's get into it, man. Our poll topic that won the poll this week right there on Facebook, facebook.com/something to wrestle, was Fully Loaded 1998. And I got to say, I'm excited to talk about this show, not necessarily for the pay-per-view, which was fun, and we're going to cover it. But this is really, to me, a show about the WWF in July of 1998. It's worth mentioning that on June 28th, Mick Foley, The Undertaker, and Jim Ross made history forever at King of the Ring in Pittsburgh. And we get questions all the time about, when are you going to cover that? Well, here's your answer. Friday, June 22nd, 2018. That's going to be the 20-year anniversary, and we will cover that show in great detail. So mark your calendars. Next June, we're going to cover that King of the Ring for 20 years. It changed Mick Foley's career forever, put him on the map for sure. And the night after that show, June 29th, the WWF destroyed WCW in the ratings. They earned their third highest rating ever when Stone Cold regained the world title from Kane in the main event. And that was actually their highest rating ever when WCW was running head-to-head. Nitro had been preempted a couple of times, or it didn't exist, and Raw would get the victory. But when they went head-to-head, this was a record for them. They did a 5.36, and that broke the record that WCW had just set in April with a 5.11. So the business is booming here. And comparing Raw's rating that night of 5.36, Nitro only got a 4.05. So what does that mean for us in layman's terms? It means more than 4.3 million people saw Stone Cold Steve Austin win his title back And that is a big deal. I mean, we're in rare air here for the WWF. Bruce, at this point, is this the most exciting time you'd had in the company up to this point?
Probably up to this point. It's a time that, the competitive juices were flowing and we're winning. You spend enough time fighting and you finally get some victories. It feels good. So this was during the time that we were winning, and we realized that what we were doing was finally starting to pay off, not just at the box office, but on TV as well, where at that point in time, that's how everybody was judging who was winning the damn war. We were making money, but it wasn't showing because people say, oh, hey, the ratings weren't reflecting that. And now the ratings were reflecting what was going on out in the real world.
Well, what killed Nitro that night, at least in my worldview, was Bischoff doing his NWO late night skit. He had patterned a whole set and a monologue and just a format like Jay Leno's Tonight Show. The segment just died in the ratings. Now, meanwhile, the WWF was trying Brawl for All. Now, we've covered that in our archives, but real quick, Bruce, take us back to 1998 and explain to us why both companies are trying to be so, and I know you hate this phrase, outside of the box with their programs here. You've got the Tonight Show skit on WCW, and then you've got Brawl for All in the WWF. You guys are trying some kind of out there stuff.
Well, I think that the audience that everybody was looking for was not necessarily the wrestling audience, because the wrestling audience was already there. Everybody was looking for, who aren't we getting? How do we get more people to come in to this bubble that we have? And the business has always grown from the outside in. So the idea was simply to try and get as many eyeballs as you could that were not normally watching your show to try your product out. And if you could hook them and keep them, then that was the magic formula. The Tonight Show skit, I can't even begin to tell you what the thinking was behind that. I understand it because WCW was working with the Tonight Show, and they had an arrangement worked out with Jay Leno, and that was going to be a big part of their upcoming pay-per-view. So they thought that was something that was going to work for them and maybe get casual viewers to tune in. For us,
in hindsight, would it have been better for them to have pre-taped this Bischoff Tonight Show skit on the actual Tonight Show and did like the NWO black and white effect and the music and cutaways? Because doing this live in front of a crowd, first of all, it probably cost an arm and a leg to make the set, but now doing it in front of a live crowd, man, it just dies. It doesn't seem like it was a fully thought idea, a well thought idea.
Well, again, I don't know what their thinking was, but you don't go into it thinking, okay, well, this is going to die. You go into it thinking it's going to get over, and you hope it gets over. But hindsight being 2020, shits the bed, and you go, fuck, we could have done that better. But at the time, you don't think it's going to shit the bed, and you do it live for that reaction.
Not
shit the bed.
Quit going to bat for your boy here. This was a fucking terrible idea.
I would have done the same fucking thing.
You would have thought, oh man, if we just put the Tonight Show set out there and have a guy nobody likes go out there and tell jokes, people will love it.
They had won in the ratings. They had done some good things in the ratings. So why wouldn't they think that? If they've got a formula that is working, they're going to try something new. You don't know it's not going to work until you go out and it fails. Well, and again, we have the ability to look at it in hindsight and say, oh, well, that really sucked. To me, I thought that Brawl for All sucked as well. So it's a matter of opinion.
They both suck for sure. But if I was a wrestling fan, I'd much rather watch Brawl for All than Bischoff telling jokes. We'll circle back. As a reminder, the main event at King of the Ring was Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kane in a first blood match. And Austin had been battling staph infection in his elbow for the week prior. So he actually spent 3 days in the hospital leading up to King of the Ring. Bruce, was the thinking here to do a title change on the pay-per-view simply so you could build the rematch for Raw and pop a rating? It feels like at the time you can give them something, give them a storyline, advance all that. But really, you do yourself a favor by setting up Raw because people will tune in to see what happened, and then you can do the rematch right there and pop a number. And it doesn't feel cheap if it was, the babyface going over on TV, right?
Well, of course it's a pop a number. Of course it's whatever we're doing. Everything was to get people to tune in. And the shock of Steve losing, that was a big shock. And you wanted people to tune in for him to get that title back. So that was the thinking behind it. And this was during a time, in my opinion, that I thought that we were doing way too many title changes. It just got to be, a fucking hot potato with the belt.
It's worth mentioning that Rhino got a tryout at this Raw we're talking about here in Cleveland the day after King of the Ring, but ultimately he wouldn't get the gig. Instead, we would see him pop up in ECW not too terribly long after this. In your opinion, Bruce, why wasn't Rhino ready in July of 98?
Simply timing and simply, he wasn't bigger than anybody else. He wasn't different. He wasn't different enough, and just wasn't his time.
The next day, Reckless Youth and Steve Corino had a tryout in State College, Pennsylvania. Chat me up, Bruce. Who was sour on these two guys?
Well, I don't think that, there's one necessary person that was sour on them. They didn't perform well. Again, same thing. Reckless Youth in particular was a darling of the independent scene. Everybody talked about how great Reckless Youth was. But when you take someone out of a high school gym and you put them in an arena, you put them in an ocean, so to speak, it's a different environment. And if they don't measure up in that regard, they screamed indie. Both of them did. They just screamed independent wrestler. Both guys are good hands in the ring, but neither one of them connected with the audience on a large level.
What do you think changed? Because, you have that opinion about Corino here, and now he's a goddamn NXT trainer.
Some guys are better trainers, better teachers than they are performers. And some guys can teach you how to do it, but he didn't have the look. He didn't have the body. He didn't have it to translate on the big screen. He wasn't somebody you wanted to put on TV and be a star, but yet he can teach someone how to do it. And he's a great guy and he's a good teacher.
In fairness, Dave Meltzer did report that it got no crowd reaction and was a bad match. Steve Regal worked Tiger Ali Singh on that card. I don't know when we'll talk about him again. So what the fuck was up with Tiger Ali Singh?
No, we'll definitely talk about Tiger Ali Singh at some point. But Tiger, he was the guy. He was going to be the anointed one to help us conquer Asia, in particular India. And that was somebody that Vince really wanted to get behind and make a new star out of. He had the size, he had the look, and that was somebody Vince wanted to push.
So Tiger Ali Singh was the original Jinder Mahal, except, Jinder worked out and Tiger didn't.
Well, I think Jinder's got some talent. I think Jinder at least can have a match. I don't think that Tiger could have that good of a match ever.
One of the things I want to ask about Tiger, I can tell you don't want to talk about Tiger. You're sandbagging me here and you want to save it for something else. What episode?
I thought he sucked.
What episode or what topic would have to win for us to talk about Tiger Ali Singh? Because he's not going to win a poll.
Oh, there'll be other times where he'll be involved in a card or something, and we'll talk about how much it sucked as well. But but at the same time, I mean, come on, man, Jesus Christ, he just a big guy, looked great standing there, and then the fucking bell had to ring, and he potentially had a huge upside. I think if he would have worked to improve in the ring, but he thought he was already there. He thought he was already a main event guy coming in.
Let me ask you this. You've told us before about Mark Mero that sometimes Vince just doesn't want to listen to anybody and kind of has it in his head, hey, this guy's the guy, and keeps pushing him no matter what. And then eventually just throws his hands up in disgust and gives up. Were people in Vince's ear about Tiger Ali Singh, or did they just say, just let him fit? It's like Christmas Vacation. It's better if you just let him finish.
There was a contingent in the office. When I say contingent in the office, there were people on the promotional side that, oh my God, man, we've got to have an Asian. We've got to have an India to conquer India. We have to have one of their own to be able to do it right. And Vince felt that way as well. And it's no different than Jinder Mahal right now or the Great Khali after that for India. Tiger Ali Singh just happened to be the guy at that time that fit that profile. And And Vince wasn't going to give up. And I think people just tried to get through it as painlessly as they possibly could.
For a lot of our younger fans who may not be familiar with Tiger Ali Singh, can you talk about what his legacy in the business was, who his family were, him as a person, any of that stuff?
Tiger Ali Singh is the son of Tiger Jeet Singh. And Tiger Jeet Singh was a huge star in Toronto and in particular in Japan. And where Tiger Ali Singh became famous was he did an angle with Antonio Inoki in Japan, where Inoki and Ali Singh were in a Macy's department store equivalent in Japan. And they saw each other and got into this huge brawl where they tore up the store for a shoot. And that made front page news and made Tiger Ali Singh a household name in Japan and carried him for about 30 years of his career. So his dad was a huge star all over the world.
And so maybe Vince respected the heritage and thought, maybe we've got something here. And for whatever reason, he just wound up being one of those offspring who didn't live up to the legacy of his father.
Well, his father wasn't that good either. He was simply a big, good-looking guy that happened to be Indian when Vince was looking for an Indian star. I think that's what it basically comes down to.
He did a segment here I want to talk about, Tiger Ali Singh, where he offered a woman $300 to eat dog food. Do you remember this skit?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Was this shit a shoot?
God damn it. It was... I think it was Russo's basically attempt at having a poor man's Ted DiBiase. In addition to that, he had a counterpart, Babu. And Babu was actually Puerto Rican or Dominican, one of the two, but he wasn't Indian. And he was like Tiger Ali step and fetch it. And it was absolutely the drizzling shits, but it was trying to recreate the magic of the $1 Million Man type segments with Tiger Ali. It sucked.
How much did Mark Henry get paid to eat his turd sandwich?
You'd have to ask him that.
Oh, come on. There's a famous story out there that Mark Henry was not necessarily well liked by the locker room once upon a time, maybe because he came in with no wrestling experience and he got paid while he was, training for the Olympics. And now he's got this long-term deal for a reported $250,000 a year. And allegedly, according to the rumor and innuendo, some of the boys didn't like this and somebody put a turd in a sandwich and he took a bite.
That's the rumor and innuendo. Yeah.
Were you there when Mark ate the doo-doo?
No, I was not. Apparently that happened overseas on a international tour at some point.
Did Mark have 1, 2, or 3 ideas of who may have put the turd in his sandwich? Or is that a big X?
I think that's probably just a big old X. And as rumor and innuendo would have it, it took Mark a couple of bites. Before he decided, wow, this sandwich tastes kind of shitty.
How would Pat Patterson describe hearing this story?
The bucket and the bite and it tastes like a shit. And I must be a little better. Maybe a little bit of mayonnaise. The sandwich is the shit. Fuck it.
Do you think Jarrett has a turd sandwich recipe?
Well, your turd, and you chop it up, and then you take, and it's better if you've eaten, like some walnuts, maybe, some pieces of apple that hadn't digested all the way. Give it some crunch.
Talk to me about Pat Patterson. He was at King of the Ring and he patted Sable on the ass before she slapped him across the face. And this is the skit with McMahon and all of his stooges, of course. But Pat missed the Raw the next night after King of the Ring and was replaced instead by Sergeant Slaughter. And so they kind of become like the Three Musketeers with Briscoe. And this happens because Louie Dondero, who was well known in the business since the Roy Shire days in the 70s and once worked for Titan himself, passed away from a heart attack. And he was just 59 years old when he passed away. Tell everyone who Lou was, Bruce.
Well, Louie Dondero was Pat Patterson's best friend in life. He was his life partner. And as Pat has told the story now, and Pat's come out and explained to everyone that he was a gay man in the wrestling business. And Louie Dondero was his partner in life. And Louie traveled all over the world with Pat. Great guy. They had met, I believe, in Boston when Pat first came to this country and was working for Tony Santos in Boston. But Louie traveled the world, and Louie passed away at the night of the King of the Ring.
Man, it's a sad deal because everybody I've ever heard who knew Lou had nothing but great things to say and say that Louie was just the coolest guy ever and never met a stranger, had a million friends.
I smoked a lot of dope with Louie Dondero, and I can pretty much count on both hands in the last 30 years the people that have cut my hair. And I let Louie Dondero cut my hair. So for several years there, Louie actually was my barber as well. He was a licensed beautician as well, and always had great pot.
Who was the better haircut? Brutus the fucking Barber Beefcake or Louie Dondero?
Louie helped Beefcake an awful lot with his barbering skills.
I bet he did. I bet he did. Hey, you can pick up a brand new shirt inspired by some of the stuff we're talking about right now. The hashtag BTFBB shirt. That's a real thing now. Hashtag BTFBB. Yep. You can get it right now over at brucepritchard.com. Even check out the PayPal, not PayPal, but PayPal. And the STW. And when you pick up a shirt from brucepritchard.com, what happens, Bruce?
Well, eventually you're going to get a call back. And to those of you that have bought shirts and I haven't called you yet, I promise I'm calling everybody back this week. It's been a crazy time. Well, you know, but it's going from no job to job, and things get a little bit crazy. I used to be over, now I'm over and just staying crazy. But go over to brucepritchard.com and don't put a T in my name. Put one on your Bizac.
William Regal debuted for the WWF on this show, and this was prior to him becoming the real man's man. And there's rumor and innuendo that Regal was fired from WCW for drugs and urinating on a flight attendant. Is this the story you heard about how things kind of came to an end for Regal in WCW? And how does he get a shot with the WWF if he's fresh off of this rumor and innuendo for drugs?
Well, the whole thing, I guess, had happened on a international flight where Steve was fucked up, and Steve came clean on it. He had kind of done his time. He was fired there, but done his time, was looking for a new start, and Vince was always one to give people a second chance. And in this particular instance, it was Regal's first chance of many, but. Shit happens, and there were enough people that were in Regal's corner saying, you know what, people fuck up, give them another opportunity, or give them an opportunity in general.
I mean, let me just say this. The Freebirds have been peeing on flight attendants since the 80s, but you're supposed to get them back to the hotel room first, right? You can't do it on the plane. That's when things get complicated and there's paperwork, right?
I guess so, man. I've never actually peed on a flight attendant.
Oh, okay. You just pee on the young boys, or how does that work?
No, I don't do that. I've been with in a hotel lobby and seen writers running out of the bathroom, the kind of public restroom there in the hotel lobby, shaking their leg, going, "Michael just pissed on my leg, and I think he did it on purpose." Dude, just saying.
Well, Freebirds, what are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
This is
fucking hang up on them is what you do.
Oh, wow. This is the Raw where Val Venis started coming on to Yamaguchi-san's wife. I guess I need to rephrase that. This is the Raw where Val Venis started making advances toward Yamaguchi-san's wife. I'll get it right. She was a worker, I believe.
No, she was a model.
Okay.
She was just simply a model.
Here's my question, I guess. It was reported in the Observer that the chick you got to play Yamaguchi-san's wife is 17 as a shoot. Is that real?
Completely 100% false.
So
Not real at all.
Were you checking IDs like before a porn shoot, or how does that work?
Well, I hired her, and I know how old she was.
Where'd you hire her?
17.
Where'd you hire her?
Models R Us.
Thank you. What would be the payoff of this Yamaguchi-san Val Venis angle? Some of our listeners may not have put this together yet, but what you're about to say, I'm sure they'll remember.
Oh, choppy, pee pee.
And what would Kai and Ty say about that?
Indeed.
So Sunny no-shows this Raw because she's quote-unquote under the weather. And somewhere around here, the WWF gave her an ultimatum to go to rehab. We covered this in great detail on our Sunny episode. In more detail, if you'd like to hear this, check it out in the archives. Shout out to Sunny, who we hope is doing well today. And while we're at it, shout out to Skype for helping us do this episode. Don Fry was working for New Japan during this time, and he challenged Ken Shamrock to a UFC fight. Was there ever any consideration by either the office or Shamrock side about trying to work with Shamrock to do both at any point?
Not really at this point. There was conversation because I was a big Don Fry fan. There was conversation about trying to get Don Fry to come into our world and actually work and learn to work. And Don had showed some interest in it, but it just kind of always fell through. He always would get a better deal to do a shoot fight somewhere. It never actually happened.
It feels weird that we're talking about this now because there's all this rumor and innuendo about Brock Lesnar right now. But it feels like at the time, Shamrock would have never been eligible to do it. But now, Lesnar's done it. So things change, Conrad.
Oh, shit.
Well, now we know kind of what Vince's attitude about protecting his investment is. But what do you think the American Dream Dusty Rhodes would say about protecting his investment in 2017?
Baby, getting a good night's sleep is easier said than done. Especially if you think you just heard the noise downstairs. Think about it. What you gonna do in that situation? You could turn on all the lights and keep watch. Check your kids' beds every hour, sleep with one eye open. Or you can rest easy, knowing that your home and your family are protected with Simply Safe. When you install your Simply Safe home security system, you're arming your home with powerful sensors that actually tell you if a door opens or if a window breaks. There's 105 decibel siren that alerts you at the first sign of trouble. And a dedicated team of security professionals watching over you 24/7, ready to send the police. It's Simply Safe. There's no long-term contract. And around-the-clock monitor is only $15 a month. So don't spend another night second-guessing your home safety. Get Simply Safe and get some rest. Go to simplysafe.com/listen and get a special 10% discount when you order today. Again, that is simplysafe.com. I'm going to spell it out for you. SIMLISAFE.com/listen, LISTEN, babies, and you be safe.
Basil DeVito is a name you drop on this show quite often, Bruce. And in June or July of '98, this is when he leaves the company to become a marketing director for a horse racing company. Do I have that right? How the hell does this come about? And what impact does it have on the company when a guy like Basil DeVito pulls out?
Well, at this point, it was the second time that Basil had pulled out. The first time that Basil had pulled out was when he left during the steroid trial because he, quote, didn't want to be associated with a guy going to jail for steroid distribution, and then was welcomed back into the company and then left again because he had an opportunity. Basil's passion, I think, was more in the race genre and the gambling genre. And Basil had an opportunity to go to work for this racetrack, and he jumped at it.
That's it. Just he had an opportunity to jump at a racetrack.
Yeah, basically, man, that was his passion. And I don't think that Basil had no passion, in my opinion,
for the business,
for the wrestling business. He had a passion for promoting and marketing. He had a passion for betting.
I got you. WCW responds to this thumping that they received the day after King of the Ring with Eric Bischoff doing the Tonight Show deal that got thumped. And they announce that they're going to hotshot Hulk Hogan and Bill Goldberg for the world title. The very next week, July 6th at the Georgia Dome, and that happened against a taped Raw. Bruce, what was the reaction internally, inside Titan Towers, when you guys hear that WCW's plan for this show against a taped Raw is Goldberg, Hulk Hogan at the Georgia Dome, instead of saving it for a pay-per-view, which I think most everyone would have assumed would have been the traditional route to go here?
We got them, and they're desperate, because otherwise, why wouldn't you have waited for, as you say, the pay-per-view? And to me, it just reeked of desperation, and they were just dead set on doing something, anything to change the tide. And Goldberg was the hottest thing that they had. And Hogan was, hell, he was their golden goose too. So put them together and let's go ahead and hot shot it and give it to them on free TV.
So July 6th rolls around and the WWF airs the spoof of the Nation of Domination that Degeneration X did. Just a couple of days ago, as we're taping this, Mark Henry was on the WWE Network defending this idea and saying that he got upset when people said this was a racial thing. I'm a little confused by that, I guess. Bruce, in your opinion, is this ever okay for a white person to dress in quote unquote blackface like they did here?
Well, what do you think?
Well,
What's your opinion?
I do think that at the time there was so much that the WWF was doing that was so over the line that they probably felt like we can do anything. But if you were to cart a white dude in blackface out on TV in 2017, it probably wouldn't go over so hot.
I don't think it would go over so hot either. And I don't know. To me, it's you're spoofing. If you're spoofing someone, whether they're white or black or green or yellow, and you spoof them, it's a spoof, and get over it. I don't know. But I can see where the sensitivities were. Well, but it was done and it is what it is.
I mean, things change. And I know we say that expression on here a lot, and I feel like that's a t-shirt sooner than later. But in 2003, a handful of years after that, but now 14 years behind us, like the number one song in America was Let's Get Retarded. And you could never do that in 2017. So I don't know that this is necessarily unique to the WWF, but so much has changed. But it still felt like, even by 1998 standards, dude, blackface is not cool. Like, this should not happen. Seems weird.
It does seem weird. I mean, it seemed weird then. It seems weird now. And even, you can throw the whole time machine in there, but it's just weird. But I think that it was looked at the rules of a parody and a spoof they technically get, you get away with all that. You just say, oh, well, hey man, no, it's just a parody. It's okay. So I think that that's what everybody was leaning on. And, like you say, you couldn't do that today.
For the record,
I wouldn't even suggest it.
Sean Waltman, X-Pac at the time, did approach Mark Henry and say, hey, I don't want to do this. And Henry gave him permission and said, we know what we're doing. But one of the things that I found funny watching this back, because I'd kind of forgotten about this, is instead of, just wearing the style singlet that Mark Henry wore, he actually put letters across the front. What was on the front of X-Pac's singlet when he was spoofing Mark Henry? Do you remember?
Mizark?
Mizark. Smarten everybody up who may not be familiar with Mizark and all that jazz.
I'll smarten everybody up the same way I got smartened up.
Okay.
Go back and watch a movie. It stars Gary Busey and Jodie Foster. And the name of the movie is Carney. And in the movie Carney, they will teach you a language. And once you figure it out, you'll get it. Not going to get it all here, by God. So you get to learn the same way I did. Do your homework. The movie is Carney. Stars Gary Busey and Jodie Foster. Great movie too. You'll enjoy it. Thank me later.
Can you say something in Carney for us and let our listeners go ahead and try to decipher it on Facebook at facebook.com/something to wrestle?
Is it shiz it?
Oh my gosh. Meltzer wrote, if you think it was similar to the NWO with the Horsemen when you see it, you're hallucinating because WWF would never copy WCW. At least they got it right because the Nation came out and attacked DX and they had a pull apart rather than having them all sit there backstage like morons like the Horsemen had to. Now, it had been at this point, Bruce, about 9 months since the NWO spoofed the Horsemen. How can you not draw similarities between the two? Doesn't this feel like a little bit of a copycat? I know you're going to say no, but I can't wait to see how you dodge this.
I'm not dodging shit. Fuck Dave Meltzer. So everything that's ever done, everything was done first on WCW. Forget about the fact that I spoofed Roddy Piper at WrestleMania. Roddy Piper spoofed Mr. T. I mean, you can go on and on and on throughout wrestling history of spoofs that guys have done on other guys. So let's go ahead and look at, well, the NWO and WCW just copied what the fuck I had done years before that. So fuck that shit. There's nothing original and everything is up for grabs. That's just complete horse shit. And that's a cop out on Meltzer because he thinks that he's the fucking end all be all genius of the world.
You don't have to get hot about it.
No, fuck him. He's wrong. And it's not, everything that we did wasn't a goddamn copy of WCW or the ECW.
I heard
he did it better.
I heard he said you had a little pecker too.
Fuck him.
The July.
Boy, they hated him overseas too. Every time his name came up, I mean, the fucking chants before I could even get it out of my mouth. Fuck Dave Meltzer. And it didn't help that when I was in Dublin, the first 3 words out of my mouth were "fuck Conor McGregor," and I like Conor McGregor. I'm a fan, but
hey,
I had to do it because I'm in Dublin.
We're doing a podcast. Stay on track. So the July 6th edition of Raw is where Undertaker no-showed Vince McMahon. So Vince demands that Kane attacks Mankind. Kane lays Mankind out with a chair and then pins him and takes his mask off to reveal that it was the Undertaker all along. Now, they couldn't do much of a match here because Mankind is obviously still very hurt from being thrown off the cage the night before at King of the Ring. And this is a tape show. So remember, even though it's a week later, it was a couple days later. And Taker at that point was working with bone chips in his ankle. So they couldn't do a lot here, but this is pretty memorable to see the Undertaker wearing Kane's outfit. I guess what we all want to know, and try to explain this to me in kayfabe, I guess, Bruce, how does Undertaker get Kane's costume?
Magic.
I mean, this feels like a Russo swerve angle where there's no
100%.
explanation as to why he's got it and how this happened. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's cool, but then you ask, well, how did he get that?
Bro, nobody cares.
Nope.
Bro, you're a mock.
Nobody cared about Phil LaFon or Doug Furnas either. They were both released around this same time. LaFon goes first, and Furnas doesn't get his release at the same time, but never works there again. I guess why were they released at separate times? Do you recall? And I guess while we're talking about them, why didn't they work out in the WWF, and how did it all come to an end?
Well, it's simply their style didn't gel, and Phil unfortunately had substance abuse problems and was showing up messed up, and it wasn't what we were looking for. We thought maybe we could do something with Doug, but after further review, just wasn't going to happen.
You guys started promoting Foot Brawl for August 8th at Foxborough Stadium. I had no recollection of this until I did some research besides one picture, which we'll get to. Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, then, now, forever, was supposed to be the referee for an arm wrestling match between Steve Austin and McMahon for like a kickoff event for the day tickets go on sale. And the Patriots were actually co-promoting the event where the players were going to be like special referees and managers and lumberjacks. And they even promote that the headline of attraction, the main event, will be The Undertaker, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Kane for the title. we're going to talk about how it ended in a minute, but how does this come about? Do the Patriots approach the WWF looking for something different? That they recognize the hype that the WWF has, or does McMahon reach out to Robert Kraft and try to put something together? How does this come about?
Well, Foxborough Stadium obviously is in our backyard.
Right.
So Robert Kraft had reached out looking to do an event, and they wanted to do something in the summer and wanted to do something big with us. We were on fire, and they had reached out to see if there was something that we could do. And the idea, I don't think we ever announced any card or any matches of that nature. We just simply announced that we were going to do a big event at Foxborough Stadiums and in conjunction with the New England Patriots organization. But that was actually we did the whole arm wrestling exhibition on this little island in the middle of Boston.
Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there.
But the fact is that then Vince met with Robert Kraft after the fact.
Okay.
So they had talked, but then the meeting didn't really take place till after the fact, which that's a whole nother story.
Well, let's do it. How was Kraft to deal with? It feels like these two guys, I mean, I don't know. This feels like evil geniuses, right? Sitting around and like they're the villains, right? And so they're in their lair as Cobra Commanders talking to Destro.
I thought that Robert Kraft, and I only got to meet Robert Kraft for a minute or two, and then he and Vince, they went off and had their meeting. But to me, Robert Kraft was positively just that old school class gentleman. Silver hair, just nice as could be. And just, he just looked like he was dripping money and dripping class.
I love you for that, because there are so many listeners who are hardcore NFL fans who just hate that motherfucker and think
Robert Kraft. Seriously?
Oh, well, they hate everything about the Patriots. They hate Tom Brady. You know, they hate Bill Belichick. They hate Robert Kraft. They hate everything about the Patriots. And there's another contingent of fans who have like a love-hate relationship with Vince McMahon, where on the one hand, they love him, and on the other hand, he's ruining wrestling. And it's just phenomenal to me to imagine these motherfuckers sitting around in the back of a Rolls Royce with some Grey Poupon, talking about first world problems. It's awesome.
No, actually, it was French's mustard, because Vince doesn't like that Grey Poupon shit.
There you go.
No, you know what? I hate the Patriots too, and not a big fan of Tom Brady. But Robert Kraft, just one-on-one and meeting him, being around him for the very little time I was to me just class personified, and seemed like a really great guy, somebody you want to sit around and have a few drinks with.
The kickoff for ticket sales we were talking about with the arm wrestling match was held on a lagoon near the Cambridge Mall Galleria. And the reports are that there were thousands of people there, like 3,000 or 4,000 people showed up for this. And of course, Doc Hendricks got thrown into the lagoon. Those pictures are out there. Was this a rib? This feels like a rib that you guys would have done.
Okay. We're on this fucking island, right? And the only way to get to it is they have like these little, they weren't pontoon boats. They were actually like, the fuck do you call them to go from the ship to shore?
A dinghy?
They were like dinghies.
Yeah.
A little bit bigger than they were large dinghies.
Is this the Tony Schiavone podcast? We're talking about little dinghies, bigger dinghies. I'm not sure what's going on.
This medium-sized dinghy. These were Boston dinghies.
They're good-sized dinghies. They're average size. They're average-sized dinghies.
Yeah, exactly. So my role this day that was, goddamn it, pal, you stick next to Austin and make goddamn sure he gets through there. Basically, I'm security for Steve. And we have Hendricks.
Why would you be security for Steve? Because you're a what?
I'm a goddamn 3-time black belt Hall of Famer, motherfucking black belt. Goddamn it! I'm trying to see how many fucking times I could fucking cuss in that one goddamn motherfucking sentence.
Remember when we said we weren't going to cuss as much on the show?
Okay, sorry. So anyway, I'm right there with Steve and shit, and and we get on the deal. And it's hotter than hell. And I'm wearing a black shirt and a damn wool gray suit. And really nice shades and everything. So we get out there, and we had been consuming a few adult beverages during the day. while we were waiting for, different things. And since I had to be with Steve, when you're with Steve, you do as Steve does. And Steve wanted a cold adult beverage. So we had a few cold adult beverages. And we go out and we do the arm wrestling deal on the lagoon. And there's Michael Hayes. Hey, Dave. And he's emceeing the whole shebang. And for the finish, Vince is like, throw me in the lagoon. No one knows what the water in the lagoon consists of. It's brown. It's a little murky. We're not sure how deep it is. But we know it ain't fresh.
I knew a girl like that.
Don't we all? So Steve dumps Vince into the lagoon. And while Vince is there, he's splashing around and going nuts. And he's like, Bruce, help me. And he's reaching out for help. So like a good soldier, I knew my role that day was to stay next to Stone Cold Steve Austin. So I immediately went from in front of the lagoon to the back behind Steve, and I tell Michael Hayes, said, Michael, good God, Vince can't swim. Help him. And Michael goes to help Vince in, and Vince just pulls Michael in.
I love this.
It was a rib.
That is
but
so
the
awesome.
Rib, the best rib of all, is the rib, the unintended rib. Because Vince ended up ribbing himself. We go back. We had a hotel for him to change into and go in and shower up and shit because this water stunk to high heaven. I think it was actually a sewer treatment.
Oh my God.
Spillover or something.
Was Mark Henry there?
No.
Okay.
But Vince comes out of the shower. He's like, God damn, look at me. He had a towel on. And his entire body is covered with like red dots and shit.
Oh God.
From having a reaction to this fucking water that he just got thrown into. So that was good times.
So Vince is allergic to poo-poo?
I guess so.
Huh.
At least poo-poo water, maybe.
Only 2,000 tickets were sold that day for a $60,000 gate. And let's remember, they're holding this at a football stadium. Ticket sales wound up being pretty odd for 1998 here. Very soft. And they wound up canceling the event. Bruce, what happened?
We didn't promote it. And when I say we didn't promote it, we did that whole stunt, getting the idea out there, and they put tickets on sale, and there wasn't a huge rush. And Vince was kind of like, maybe not. And I think that the fact that Vince and Kraft really hadn't ironed everything out prior to this, that it probably just didn't end up being a really good financial decision to go out and do this thing without a lot of promotion and without essentially us doing it on our own. And it as quick as it was on, it was off. Never to be heard from again. But it was a cool day.
Ultimately, though, you guys canceled the event to save some money, right?
Oh, hell yeah.
So, that's how Vince saved money in 1998. But how would Vince tell our listeners to save money now in 2017?
Well, damn, save with Bruce, pal. You just go to savewithbruce.com. You got a mortgage? You got bills? You got car payments? Consolidate all of that into one low monthly payment and let savewithbruce.com help you. It's that simple. You just go, you fill out a simple form. It's fast. It's easy. And you know what, pal? You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can qualify, and SaveWithBruce.com will help you start saving money now.
NMLS number 65084. Hook it up. We'll save you some cash right now. SaveWithBruce.com. So somewhere around here, it comes out that Severin had done an interview talking about Shamrock and kind of taking him to task for steroids. And Dan said he didn't like anyone who wasn't natural. And he goes on to say, I quote, let's just say he didn't get his body just by working out. But then again, most of the bigger guys in wrestling didn't. When it was brought up about Shamrock admitting to do those things in the past, Dan shot back, I don't know if it's so much in the past. Was there any heat on Dan for discussing steroids in a public forum like this and basically just accusing a WWF contracted performer of using steroids just a few years after McMahon was on trial. This feels like the fucking capital no-no of what not to do when you're working for the WWF at the time.
I would have to say it's a capital, just common sense. Why bring it up?
Yeah.
And why go there? There's no right answer, and you just move the hell on. But, Dan, I think, kind of had a feeling of he didn't look like a bodybuilder. He didn't, have that look, but he knew he was a tough guy and he was a shoot fighter and had to let everybody know. So it just, not the best timing and not the best choice of subject matter.
It came out that Andrew Martin, who would later become Test, but at this point was just in developmental, was detained at the Canadian border for something on his record. Bruce, if this guy is having trouble traveling before he's ever on fucking TV, how did he get this far in the business? I mean, isn't this a potential red flag to Vince right up front that, hey, if he can't travel, maybe let's not call him up?
Well, it was simply a misunderstanding. It was simply a misdemeanor, and it wasn't anything major that was going to prevent him from going back and forth, which obviously it was all taken care of and moved on. But if it was something more that would have kept him from being able to go overseas, it would have never happened. So it was just a minor deal.
The WWF briefly called the Godwins here Southern Justice, and they were managed by Tennessee Lee. Whose idea was this, and what did it sound like when Jim Cornette pitched it?
Well, actually, it was Jerry Jarrett's idea.
Are you serious?
If you go back to the original incarnation of Jeff Jarrett and Double J Jeff Jarrett, you go back to those early vignettes.
Right.
If you notice, Jeff always had an entourage. Well, that was Jerry's thing about, and this is me surmising what I think Jerry was thinking, was he was so afraid of Jeff either getting over or not getting over that he kept pitching, well, Jeff has to have an entourage. If you put a big entourage around him, then he's got all these people. He's got a secretary, he's got an agent, he's got a manager, he's got a roadie, he's got an entourage. That at this point with Jeff coming back, it was kind of a repackaging Jeff. And to where Vince being Vince McMahon went back to, goddamn, we'll put an entourage around him. Like an entourage. Which was always kind of funny to listen to Vince do the Jerry Jarrett imitation as well. Now,
so Vince has a Jerry Jarrett.
Yes.
I love that.
We all had Jerry Jarrett.
Give me Vince doing Jerry Jarrett.
I just did it. We all sounded the same. I just did it better.
Okay.
God damn it, he's an entourage. Well, you know. Yeah, we all kind of sounded the same. It was all that hillbilly shit. But Jeff was kind of being repackaged, and the Godwins were also in need of repackaging. So, let's take the hog farmers, put them in suits, slick their hair back, put them in ponytails, and wear sunglasses and be cool. It lasted all of about maybe 5 weeks, 6 weeks.
Yeah, it was not long for this world.
It didn't work.
Somewhere around here, a couple of kids, ages 12 and 15, file a lawsuit against the WWF. And their complaint is that their legs were severely injured when wrestlers brawled into the guardrail. Two wrestlers were Hawk and Phineas. Do you remember this? It happened at the Anaheim Pond on June 23rd. Was this common at the time? Or what was the standard protocol for handling lawsuit situations like this at the time?
Were lawsuits common? Somewhat. But, normally what would happen is, and I hated the guys going into the railings. I absolutely hated it for this very reason. Because you never can tell. And you have kids sometimes, and they're right up on the railing. And it's just dangerous. And it's not necessary as well. So I do remember an incident and a lawsuit happening. Normally what would happen is if somebody got hurt, they would try and take care of it that night. And if it was a minor incident, then you get a medical attention, you see what you can do and help them out and take care of it without it ever having to get to the lawsuit stage.
Let me ask you this. When you're at a live event a guardrail collapses on a kid. Who goes over to his parents and asks him if he wants to meet Stone Cold Steve Austin and get 2 Rocky Maivia t-shirts?
Security.
That's the plan, is it not? Meet a superstar, get a t-shirt, and fucking don't sue.
Oh man, you want to take care of it right then and there. Your first and foremost is make sure everybody's all right.
Well,
I mean, you go, no, you do, man. You go and immediately take them, and you get a medical attention, and you have a doctor check them out, make sure that they're okay. And then you say, who's your favorite wrestler?
That's what I was hoping for.
And that motherfucker will magically appear.
USA and MTV were hot for WWF wrestlers at this point. Austin had been filmed for MTV shows like Fantasies. USA wanted Edge for some of their shows. Triple H had worked on Pacific Blue. There's lots of cross-promotion stuff going on here. Do you remember, was there anyone in particular who wanted to do this sort of thing and asked for it? And conversely, was there anyone who hated it and wanted nothing to do with it?
Undertaker hated it. Undertaker didn't want to have anything to do with it. He didn't want to do anything in that acting realm or be on anybody's shows or have a guest appearance or anything like that.
Because it killed the gimmick, he thought, or because he just didn't fucking want to do it?
I think more, probably a little bit of both, but probably the gimmick he didn't feel. Undertaker's Undertaker, man.
Right.
He lives the gimmick. So he was uncomfortable stepping out of that role. Didn't want to have anything to do with it. And there were more often at this time, there were people that were out kind of shopping the talent to fit different roles. So if you needed a guy that looked like Stone Cold Steve Austin, you had Stone Cold Steve Austin. The Nash Bridges stuff and all that kind of happened, I think, in the same time frame, maybe a little bit later. But it was that typecasting.
Meltzer reported around this time that the WWF had worked out a deal with AC/DC to license Highway to Hell for the SummerSlam pay-per-view. Bruce, tell us, how did that deal go down, and give us an idea of what the cost might have been for that?
I have no idea what the cost was, and even if I did, wouldn't tell you. But AC/DC were actually big fans of the product, and we happened to become friendly with a few of the guys and their management, and vice versa. So they were receptive to having their thing be a part for SummerSlam. And I heard that it was a great deal because you can imagine the licensing on that, some of that shit could be astronomical.
So let me pitch this. First of all, I don't understand what you're saying. You're not going to tell me anyway. We're not talking about,
I don't know
what guys were paid. Is this a 6-figure deal or is this a sweetheart deal?
This was a sweetheart deal.
Okay.
And I really and truly have no idea what it was, but I do know it was a sweetheart deal.
Was there ever any consideration, because it was reported and it was kind of tongue in cheek at the time, was there ever any serious conversation about McMahon attempting to buy the Minnesota Vikings around this point? I asked because I saw it reported a couple of different places that there was a hypothetical, there was a what if, there were just preliminary conversations, but they sold for $250 million. And in July of 98, Vince didn't have that kind of scratch, did he?
Close. Business was good. You can always get loans. And yeah, there were discussions. There were a lot of what if discussions. Was getting interested. He was thinking about dabbling in, looked at buying the Harlem Globetrotters, looked at Minnesota Vikings, sports franchises that were available. So yeah, I think he was seriously considering it at some point.
In hindsight, how might the world have been different had Vince McMahon purchased the Vikings in 98 and not fucked with the XFL?
Wow. I don't know, because his attention still would have been divided. No matter how you did it, if he had purchased the Vikings, for example, he still would have been devoting time to that during the season, and it would have taken his time away from the wrestling product. So I don't know that it would have been any different. I'm not sure that the NFL, knowing what I know now about the NFL Owners Association, I don't know that they necessarily would have welcomed Vince with open arms.
I ask because, in 2014, it was reported that the Vikings are worth $1 billion. So
there you go.
It's funny to think about what if. Around this time, and we've talked about this briefly in the past, Steve Austin had a photo shoot for the cover of TV Guide, which, considering the visibility at the time, and I know it feels weird to talk about that type of magazine or publication in 2017, but in 98, it was huge. Meltzer wrote, quote, "I can't recall a wrestler ever getting a cover, although Hogan may have gotten a small insert photo in 1990 when they were doing the biggest TV stars of the decade, and Hogan finished unusually high on the list. The day Austin's photo hits the stands, it is the official sign to the mainstream that Hogan is done because a wrestler made a major magazine cover that virtually everyone that goes shopping for food at any time, whether they buy it or not, will see the TV Guide cover. And if it's not Hogan, therefore Hogan is yesterday's news." Bruce, it was a big deal, but what do you think of Meltzer's assessment here that this kind of represents a little bit of a changing of the guard, that Hogan had kind of been the guy you thought of for pro wrestling, and now here in July of 98, that's already changing to Stone Cold Steve Austin?
Well, I take exception to the Hogan fishing unusually high on the list. Fuck Dave Meltzer. The simple fact that, Hogan was one of the most recognizable celebrities in the world, especially in the 80s, that's just a simple fact. The fact that Steve Austin now is on the cover of TV Guide, folks, I don't know how you would describe that to a kid today that's, say, 15 years old. The magnitude of being on TV Guide at that time is like every time that you look at your phone, there's a picture of Stone Cold Steve Austin. Because no matter where you went, that TV Guide was right there at the checkout stand. The TV Guide was the most recognizable periodical in the world, or at least in the States, because you had to buy a TV Guide to see what the hell was on TV back in those days. Now are they even in business anymore?
Well, check this out. Just as a heads up, the parent company, Triangle Publications, sold in 1988 for $3 billion. That's in 88. They sold for $3 billion. And I mean, it's a big deal. Their distribution, it was the biggest publication in the history of publications. I mean, it's next level. And here's what's fun about Meltzer's report here, and I know you'll get a kick out of this. When the Stone Cold one comes out, they actually did two covers, and Hogan had the other one.
That's unusual. Why would Hogan be on there? Yeah, they're wrestlers.
Yeah. Hey, let me challenge you for this. I'm going to try to not say the phrase "go ahead" for the rest of the show. I say it a lot and don't think about it. But you so far today in this show have said the word simple or simply 917 times. I challenge you to not say simple or simply, and you can challenge me to go ahead and not say go ahead for the rest of our show.
All right, you go ahead and do that, and I'll simply try it.
Deal. On the July 13th edition of Raw, Shawn Michaels is back. He's introduced as the new color commentator, and he's here as a total babyface. And this happens just a few months after dropping the title to Austin as a heel in the main event of WrestleMania 14. And Meltzer wrote at the time, they felt like they needed to do something because they were paying him $15,000 a week. And I guess the WWF thinks, hey, we need all the help we can get in our ratings war. So he's back. And because he's returning, people are going to cheer him anyway. Let's just present him as a babyface. Do I have that about right? How does this come about?
Shawn Michaels was under contract, and we were looking to be able to utilize him and keep him in front of the audience and find something for him to do without getting in the ring and taking bumps every week.
He'd been sitting home for months at this point. Does somebody have to talk him into coming back? Was he being kind of, petulant about coming back and wanting to stay on the sidelines? Or was he receptive to, hey, I want to be back with the band and perform some way?
He was receptive, but he was also reluctant because he felt that going out and being on television and not performing to the level that Shawn Michaels felt that he needed to perform every single night, that was something that
but we're talking about
Shawn wasn't comfortable with.
We're doing commentary.
I get that.
But
Shawn considered himself a wrestler and performer and didn't want people to now look at him as a commentator he's no longer the showstopper. He's no longer the main event. He's no longer the man. He's just a commentator.
So
in my opinion, that was Shawn's, I think that was in his head.
Is that why it didn't last? He was just in his head about it?
And he wasn't any good.
Well, there you go. That's what I was hoping you'd say. The DX skit about Nation of Domination is really the first time we see Jason Sensation easy for me to say.
Easy for you to say.
Jason can I do this? Jason Sensation. See, I can do it separately, but putting it together, that's like an Alabama tongue twister for a hillbilly like me. He did impressions about Owen and Brett, and Owen worked really, really well in these. And of course, this is, several months after Brett's been screwed in the screw job here, but he's still mimicking Brett and Owen. How awesome were these? And how did you guys find Jason?
If I remember correctly, we first were introduced to Jason Sensation at a Toronto press conference. He did some impressions for us, off the chart, entertaining as hell. I can't think of anybody that Jason didn't do well. However, his number one impression that you could close your eyes and you were there was Owen Hart. It was natural, and Jason had the nuances of everybody. Again, I remember Jason just going all the way down the roster and doing everybody. He was great and extremely entertaining. So it was just an opportunity to put him out there.
Hey, who else do you know who went all the way down the roster and did everybody?
Well, I'm not going to play into those little damn games.
Eventually, we see Yamaguchi-san's wife under the covers with Val Venis and address the rumor and innuendo again. She's not 17, right? It's not statutory here.
See, this is the sad thing about it. This guy, Meltzer, gets something from somewhere completely 100% false. Couldn't be further from the truth. But he prints it and everybody takes it as fact because the God Almighty Meltzer printed it at one time, that we're sitting here in 2017, 19 years later, and you still bring it up. No, she was not 17 at the time.
Well, did somebody...
She was in her 20s.
Did somebody break her off a piece of that Kit Kat bar?
Oh, boy.
Just asking.
How would I know?
Well, I thought she got some of that candle action. A week later, Mr. Yamaguchi-san comes out with Kai and Tai, and he says he's going to paddle her for doing wrong the prior week. And then Val makes the save. Bruce, did you ever paddle your women? It feels like something you would have been into.
Today?
Oh, anytime. I guess today is the answer, though. During this time, Jackie is feuding with Sable, and Miro, of course, at this point, is siding with Jackie. Along the way, they get the better of Sable and strip her down to her underwear before Edge saves her. How was Jackie to work with during this time? This feels like some of her interviews and promos that she was doing weren't the most polished. Maybe she wasn't the most comfortable on the mic, and you guys are asking her to kind of step out of her comfort zone here.
I look at it like this. Jackie was being Jackie, and that's what I liked about Jackie. She wasn't polished, and it wasn't having someone read lines and come across like they're acting. To me, it was very real with Jackie. She struggled with stuff in real life, and it was natural. So for Jackie to go out and do all this, going back and revisiting it, I thought she was great. And I've worked with Jackie for a long time, and she's as tough as the day is long as well.
Around this time, Hunter was asking attractive girls on house shows and dark matches to show their boobs, and it happened a lot. Meltzer wrote, "This may be off TV and is almost surely a plant since it's happening so frequently at certain house shows on the same tour, but never at shows on another tour. But anyway, a woman took off her top after the match. Bruce, what's the deal? Were these working boobs or shoot boobs?"
No, they were shoot boobs. I think it became a contest.
Really?
To see if they could get somebody to show their boob.
Were they taking bets in the back and I bet I can get will do it or whatever?
Essentially, hey, you think you get anybody get their top off tonight and go out and try to get somebody to take their top off. Yeah.
Triple H was apparently pretty good at it. Was that fair to
Apparently,
say?
yeah. He was very good at it.
I mean, he at least got Shawn and Stephanie. Roll Tide.
Well, you know.
Teddy Hart was booked to be in his first WWF camp at just 17 years old. Bruce, we've talked about him before, but what was the word on Ted Annis before he came in?
Stu Hart's grandson, and it was going to be the first third generation, I think, at that point. Third or fourth?
Well, I was going to say,
that right?
what was Rocky?
Okay, you're right, Rocky. But he was, first third generation for the Hart family.
All right.
Yeah, first Canadian third generation.
See, guys, Bruce just makes shit up sometimes. Crackhead Bob, Hank the Angry Drunken Dwarf, and Fred the Elephant Boy, all from the Whack Pack on the Howard Stern Show, were backstage, but not used on camera for a Raw here. We've talked about them briefly before, but I don't know that we dug into this. How were these Whack Packers received by the locker room? Were there any Stern fans you remember in the locker room?
They were received with disdain
by all the boys.
Majority of them, yeah.
Okay.
It was a joke. They showed up messed up. And
wait. Are you insinuating that Hank the Angry Drunken Dwarf had some alcohol, or that Crackhead Bob was under the influence?
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and say it. Yes.
Okay. Well, we don't often talk about just out and out drug use here on the show, but you're on record. Crackhead Bob was not himself, not of right sound mind.
And Dwarf the Angry Midget was fucked up.
You're not allowed to say midget. That's not a thing. You can't do that.
Oh. Well, he was angry and he was drunk.
He was. What did Vince think of this? I mean, give me a Vince impression when he first sees Crackhead Bob.
What the fuck is he on? Is he on drug?
Mr. McMahon, sir, that's Crackhead Bob, sir.
Oh!
He's on the crack, Mr. McMahon. He's Bob. Mr. Russo brought him here with the drunk little person and Fred the Elephant Boy.
What?
Fred the Elephant Boy, Mr. McMahon. They're from the Howard Show on the radio.
Howard Finkel's got a show now?
No, with the foul language and the boobs and the chicken salad. ABC
I like boobs.
How do you like them?
I like titties.
Mr. McMahon, Jackie is going to be on Fully Loaded. What would you like to see from Jackie tonight on the pay-per-view, Mr. McMahon?
Chocolate boobies. Tell me more about the boobs.
They ran a show on ABC here called Inside Pro Wrestling, and the story was mostly just about the strong television ratings. And of course, they don't even talk about how you guys were really conning the system here, splitting Raw into 2 shows and shit like that. And both you guys and WCW participated in this. How does a show like this get greenlit? Do you have any memories of this piece? I'm just curious. Do they reach out to Vince? Are there things talked about beforehand about, hey, we're not going to talk about this, we are going to talk about that, blah, blah, blah?
As hard as it is to believe, Dave Silva and the fake news lie when they do these kind of things. They had approached us to do a piece on us, and they approached WCW to do a piece on them. And then after they got everything they wanted, did it on the 2 of us. But it was pitched to us to be a favorable piece on us, talking about our ratings and the skyrocketing ratings that were going on at the time. But guess what? Fake news and ABC lied, Dave Silva.
Well, let's talk about the skyrocketing. I'm glad you mentioned that. I want to just take a minute here and compare year over year. And of course, I've talked about my love of 1997 on this show a great deal, but let's talk about what a difference 97 to 98 is. The average attendance to a WWF show in June of 97 was 5,687 folks. 1 year later, June of 98, the average attendance is 9,568. So it's a 68.2% jump in 1 calendar year. Now let's look at the gate and what that means dollar-wise. In 97, it's $93,311. In 98, it's 179,374. So you're talking about 92.2% increase year over year. The house shows were selling out at a much greater rate as well. In June of 97, they only sold out 5.9% of the house shows. In June of 98, they sold out 46.7% of the house shows. Ratings were up too. The average rating in June of 97 was a 1.7. This is on cable, of course. The average rating on cable in June of 98 is a 2.7. So 58.8% difference. And when you compare like King of the Ring to King of the Ring, which we've covered 96 before, I'm sure we're going to cover 98 next year. At some point, we'll get to 97. The June 97 King of the Ring had 9,300 paid for a $202,000 gate, and it did a 0.5 buy rate for 1.5 million. 1 year later, it's over 17,000 tickets. It's a sellout. They have 539,000 at the gate, and they do a 0.85 buy rate, which is 3.86 million. So overall, you're up 70% on your buy rate, and your overall event revenue is up 145%. This is unprecedented year-over-year growth for the WWF during the history of the company, is it not?
Absolutely. But I would like to point something out here, folks. Conrad does this for a living. If you go to savewithbruce.com, he does this every single day, saving people money, and explains it kind of like he just did. Shows you how you can save and how he can help you live a better life. So what he does every day, it amazes me. Yes, it was an absolutely phenomenal time in the business.
Let's talk about year over year, just real quick. 95, 96, 97, 98. And I'll just do the ends. I'll do 95 and 98. Average attendance in 95, 3,275. So 3,275 folks. In 98, 3 years later, 9,050. So you're talking 3 times the audience. The gate goes from 44,658, $44,000 at the gate in 95. In 98, 156,000. The ratings, they go from a 2.13 to a 2.45. Process that. Everybody's always wanting to act like ratings are the end all be all. In 95, it was a 2.13. In 98, it's a 2.45, but we just talked about the gate. It didn't matter. Buy rate, very, very similar, you would think, right? Nope. 0.95 in 95. By 98, 1.01. Now, what does that mean dollar-wise? 2.66 compared to 4.42. So almost an extra $2 million per pay-per-view. It's a huge time to be in the World Wrestling Federation. You got to think the difference here is one guy. It's Stone Cold Steve Austin. Am I right, Bruce?
I think so. I think it was definitely Stone Cold Steve Austin. The business overall was red hot.
No, it certainly was. The NWO had certainly heated up, but Stone Cold responded, man. And obviously, we're not talking about WCW much on this show. It's a WWF show. But Stone Cold's responsible for this, and we've talked about it a lot in the past. Hulk Hogan made Vince McMahon a millionaire. Steve Austin made Vince McMahon a billionaire. Obviously, it's chicken and the egg. You know, we'll never know if they were at their height at the same time, what would have been possible. But this is another level of business, and it really pulls the nose up, as they like to say, because all of a sudden, business is good, and it's because of Stone Cold Steve Austin. Meltzer reported around this time that the Shamrock Owen Hart match would be taped ahead of time and then edited. Of course, this took place on Fully Loaded in the famed dungeon at the Hart House and had mats on the floors, a low ceiling, no ring, and no ropes. And Meltzer wrote, it hasn't been taped at press time, but not sure when they're sending the guys up there to get it done. It's interesting on a lot of levels, not just because it's a unique environment for the match, but also because Stu Hart is letting the WWF tape a pay-per-view match at his house after everything that went down last year in Montreal. While Owen is his son, and WWF may be paying him for using the house, and the money may come in handy in saving the house, it is still a slap in the face at Bret because of how the WWF treated him. Bruce, your response.
If Stu Hart were put in the same position as Vince McMahon was put in Montreal, Stu Hart would have done the exact same thing. So I don't think that Stu Hart felt it was a slap in the face at all. He felt it was business and the right and only thing to do. So I'm going to stop with what I've been saying earlier. I'm just going to simply say FDM for the rest of the show. FDM.
You just said simply again.
Sorry. Well, I'm taking away bad words.
Well, let me ask you this though, because I'm of the opinion that this feels like Vince trying to throw money at a situation to make it okay. He knows maybe he's wronged Brett and the Hart family, and there's some heat. And if he can somehow justify it by saying, well, Brett may be mad, but Stu's fine with it. Stu gets it. He's a promoter. I mean, by God, he let me do a pay-per-view in his basement, for Christ's sake. Of course he's fine with it. Meanwhile, maybe that wasn't the way it really went down. And he kind of insinuated.
Fine.
Well, was he fine with it because he needed the money to save the house and he was in a bad financial spot? That's kind of inferred here by Meltzer. So it feels a little bit like
It's
Vince.
inferred, but it's not true. And it's simply being able to take the Hart family name, which Owen Hart obviously was entitled to as well, talking about the legacy of the dungeon. And he's in a program with a shoot fighter and Ken Shamrock, and be able to utilize that and take the legacy of Stu Hart and the dungeon and capitalize on it. That's it.
The WWF announces they're going to be running a primetime show on Sunday for the month of August, starting at 7 p.m. Of course, this is the genesis of Sunday Night Heat. It's been on our poll before. Bruce, whose idea was this and how did it come about? I'm sure we'll talk about the decision to convert it to a long-term thing, but this feels like with the success of everything else that the WWF is doing, USA may have come to them and said, hey, can you give us another show? Or did Vince call and say, hey, you've seen the success of our other stuff. Let us go live right before our pay-per-views on Sundays. How does that come about?
A combination of all the above. We were looking for an added boost to the pay-per-view. So if you've got an audience for free on basic cable, USA Network, then you can push them to the pay-per-view for that hour before. USA, looking for more programming from us because of the rating success of Monday Night Raw, thought, well, rather than do it once a month, let's do it every week. And Vince loved that idea. You give him more, he's going to take a whole lot more. That was it. It was one more show to write, one more show to produce. And it was, I don't know that it was received all that well from everybody on the production side. It was more to do.
Yeah. I mean, especially you, because it's been reported that you were lazy as shit and didn't want to do anything, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's it. I was laziest son of a gun in the world. I never did shit. 22 years, I never did anything.
Yeah, and that's what we hear about here. This change in adding Sunday Night Heat here causes SummerSlam to be pushed back to 8 p.m. Is this when you guys officially move it back an hour for all pay-per-views?
This was Vince's whole West Coast, East Coast scenario. And Vince had his brothers. I think he always would have started at 8 o'clock because his feeling was starting earlier than that, 7 o'clock on the East Coast, made it 4 o'clock on the West Coast, and just felt that was too early for those folks out there.
Regarding house shows, Meltzer wrote, the Austin matches have been moved in most cities from the final match on the show to the final match before the first intermission so they can get Austin out of the building, as there have been problems in a lot of cities with fans getting so rowdy when he leaves and trying to beat on his car to stop him from getting out. Any stories about this sort of behavior stick out to you about Austin having a hard time?
Everything happened so fast. What I mean by that is the popularity. It felt like it was almost overnight. And I dare say that we weren't necessarily as prepared as we should have been for it. So you're used to business as usual. And the guys drive from town to town by themselves. They all hook up. They go to the hotel. You're on your own. You get out at the end of the night. The heels may have a few people yelling and screaming at them. And the baby faces are going to have some hangers on that want an autograph and take some pictures. This was something brand new where throngs of people were hanging out just wanting to get a glimpse of Stone Cold and The Rock and just everybody at that point. Just want to touch them, just want to be near them. And it became a problem. It became dangerous, and it became a real problem trying to get guys from just simply from the building to their cars and then out of the arena parking lot. So had to do something. So we had to change the way we did business, and we brought in actual security consultants. We had extra security at the buildings. We also had extra security at the hotels, and even meeting guys on and off the airplanes. So it was new to us. And this was one of the things that we did with Steve, because he was on fire. Let's put him on earlier, get him the hell out of there and get him safe back to his hotel.
At a Shotgun Saturday night taping, Kurgan and Golga had Rachel Rockets, a stripper and porn star with a very large set of gimmicks, who wore a shirt that said, "Jackal me off." And she ripped that shirt off, and a shirt underneath read, "Smells like ratings." Meltzer wrote, quote, "Her and the Stern cast of characters were supposed to be on the Meadowlands Raw, but the show ran long. They were supposed to be on the Binghamton Raw, but the Stern crew, in particular Hank the Drunken Dwarf, no-showed Binghamton, which is what drunken dwarfs do. Anyway, the byplay went something like this. Jim Cornette said it may not smell like ratings, but like tuna." Give me something here, Bruce.
What the fuck are we doing? This goddamn rejects from a goddamn whorehouse fucking slut coming in. Why the fuck are they even on a goddamn show in our backstage area? Fuck the goddamn drunken little midget motherfucker and goddamn pillhead, goddamn heroin head Bob. I hate them all. And fuck you to the motherfuckers that came up with this horse shit.
Oh my gosh. Hey,
That's
so
pretty much about what it was. That's almost verbatim.
you have any fun memories of Rachel Rockets?
No, I don't have any fun memories of Rachel Rockets.
It felt like she would have been over like Rover. That's all.
No, not necessarily, because it was all attached to that whole Howard Stern Rat Pack. What were they called?
Whack Pack.
What's a Rat Pack?
Whack
Pack. And
Ack.
did not equal ratings, didn't equal anything but disgust and disdain.
Hey now. This show was originally called In Your House, Off with Their Heads. Was that ever a consideration? Because Meltzer had reported for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks that this was going to be called In Your House, Off with Their Heads. And there had been like a King of the Ring poster from 98 where it had like, I guess a guillotine on there. Was this ever a consideration? Were you guys once upon a time thinking about naming a show Off with Their Heads?
It might have been a consideration at some point. And then clearer minds and better judgment prevailed.
So what was the thinking with Fully Loaded? Just the gimmicks?
Sure.
Okay. Let's talk about...
You would be surprised how these meetings go sometimes. Just you run the gambit of Off with Their Heads to Jackal Me Off to Fully Loaded to WrestleMania. It just runs the whole gambit.
I really wish that Jackal Me Off had caught on and we were talking about who was going to main event Jackal Me Off 35 next year. That would be so awesome. Don't you think?
No, I don't.
I feel like Rachel Rockets could have starred in Jackal Me Off Volume 35. It might be available.
She did, didn't she?
Maybe so. Let's talk about the pay-per-view. Wrestling Observer newsletter fans gave this a 31% thumbs up for Fully Loaded and a 40.7% thumbs down and 27.8% thumbs in the middle. Bruce, you just watched this for the first time in almost 20 years. What'd you think? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in the middle?
I gave it a thumbs up.
Nah, I'm more thumbs in the middle on this one. The best match on the card, according to the readers of the Observer, was Rocky Maivia versus Hunter Hearst Helmsley. And the worst match, I think this is unanimous, LOD versus DOA. Do you agree with those assessments about best match, worst match?
For me, the best match tied was Rocky and Hunter and the tag match with Stephen Taker and Mankind and Kane. Those were the two best matches to me. The two stinkers to me were the LOD, DOA match and Mark Henry and Vader.
Meltzer was often critical of the WWF undercards at the time, saying WCW blew the WWF away as far as match quality underneath. But I think everybody agrees, including Meltzer, that WCW couldn't hold a candle to the WWF main events. I tend to agree. Would you think that's a fair assessment that WCW at the time may have had stronger undercards, but you guys really delivered when it came to the main event?
We delivered where people paid their money to see. And I think that the undercard on this show, it wasn't horrible by any stretch of the imagination. I think there were some damn good matches. There were two that sucked, sure. But I think that if you were to compare top to bottom on both companies, that our events would definitely be better.
It's been said a lot that Vince McMahon really only cares about the main event and the top programs. He doesn't really have a lot of time for the undercard in the middle of the card. Is that a fair assessment or a fair criticism of Vince at different times?
Yes, it definitely is.
So here's my question, I guess. If we all agree that the WWF had better main events here, isn't that like a credit to Vince McMahon? Because we agree they've got better main events and that's where he's really paying his attention. Do you think that Vince is maybe more of a wrestling fan than some wrestling fans think he is?
He is a huge wrestling fan.
I know that sounds silly, but you've heard this, that, oh, Vince hates wrestling. He doesn't want to be called World Wrestling Entertainment. He doesn't like the word wrestling. He wants it to be something it's not, and that he hates all the wrestling stuff. But here, if we're saying, well, he's in charge of the main events, and we agree that's where the best matches are, it feels like he's got kind of a mind for what's a good match and what's not a good match. So in your opinion, this is what I was building towards. It took me forever. What made a good match in Vince McMahon's eyes?
Drama and story.
So some people I've heard in the company say they view a good match based on how often the fans stand up and sit down. Like when they get out of their seats and they go back down. So it's kind of highs and lows. You're getting them up and you're bringing them back down. Is that Vince McMahon's way of thinking and they're kind of parroting that? Or is he more about, I don't think he's about flashy moves or high spots. Kind of talk me through in greater detail what Vince likes in a match.
Vince likes to take people on a ride. And if you were to compare a match to a ride in an amusement park, there are people that go to an amusement park and they like to go immediately to the merry-go-round, where they just go around and around in a circle, but they like to sit on the carriage that doesn't really move much. If you were to go to an amusement park with Vince McMahon, he would go directly to the roller coaster because he wants those highs and he wants those lows. The higher the high, the lower the lows. And you take people on a ride and you never know what's around the next corner. So, yeah, Vince likes to take them on an emotional roller coaster. Bring them up, take them down, only to get them up that much higher at the end.
Well, fans were up this night. The show is sold out at the Selland Arena to the tune of 9,855 fans, 8,835 paid, a total of $179,435. They had $71,239 in merchandise, and this all happened several days ahead of time as far as the sellout. So there's no opportunity for walk-up. But you can still go ahead and pick up tickets to see Bruce and I this weekend in Philadelphia. Go to livenation.com July 23rd, right before WWE does Battleground at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at TLA in Philadelphia. We're going to be there. We're going to make you laugh. Tickets are only $35. Look it up right now, livenation.com. Come see Bruce and I in Philadelphia this Sunday. The preliminary buy rate, Meltzer would report, let me get this right. Quote, we've received very preliminary buy rate information that this show did the lowest buy rate of the year for any WWF or WCW event. Now, in actuality, of course, we're saying this in hindsight, it did 329,000 buys. It beat King of the Ring, Unforgiven, Over the Edge, and No Way Out this year. So it was not necessarily, this underperforming pay-per-view. Maybe it was in the bottom half of the 12, but still, it beat 4 other shows. Were you guys pleased with these numbers? It's sold out. How can you not be pleased, right?
Yeah, it was respectable numbers. So yeah, we're definitely pleased with them. And especially for this time of year.
That's what I was going to say. At this time of year, you're really building towards SummerSlam. So this is just kind of a throwaway, not unlike Battleground this weekend. That's their throwaway pay-per-view. The real main event is at 2 o'clock at TLA, livenation.com, Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. The first match that night, though, was Venis pinning Jeff Jarrett in just about 8 minutes. Venis teased that he was going to take his trunks off to open the match, but he was interrupted by Jarrett's music and the voice of Tennessee Lee. Kai and Tai and Wally-san came out, and now they have Wally-san on commentary. Meltzer wrote that this was a bad move. He says that he goes on and on for several minutes saying that there's going to be a surprise on Raw for Val. And he even writes, with the exception of the time Sherry Martel did color on a pay-per-view match about 8 or 9 years ago where she was fully loaded, this was about as bad as we've seen a guest in that position. It seemed like he was out there just so they could do a short Japanese guy with a small dick who can't satisfy his wife line for Venis at the end. So at the end, Val says, stand up, Mr. Yamaguchi-san. And he says, oh, you are standing up. He does his fingers kind of close together, and he says, no wonder she's not fulfilled, or something like that, compared to the big Balboski. Do you have a response? I mean, whose idea was it to put Yamaguchi on commentary? You watched it back this week. It's not good. What did you think about it in hindsight?
It would have had to improve a great deal just to suck. It was not good, and I think that Wally went to the Jerry Jarrett School of Commentary. He said, about 300 times in that span of 8 minutes. Not good. I think that they could have accomplished it with a promo at the very end of the match and gotten the desired effect that they were looking for. Didn't work. The commentary wasn't great. However, I thought they had a damn good match.
Yeah, and Meltzer agreed. Meltzer said that Venis looked kind of green, but Jarrett looked good, and the match wound up being better than most WWF openers. He gave it 2.25 stars, and I don't know when we'll talk about him again. So let's talk about Tennessee Lee's character. Can you kind of describe to me why Tennessee Lee was here? I know you talked earlier about Jeff Jarrett when he was first there when Jerry Jarrett, but what was his role in the company? Was he strictly on air? Who was campaigning for him in this role? It feels unnecessary in hindsight.
There were a lot of guys that were campaigning actually for Robert Fuller at the time, who portrayed Mr. Lee, by God. And it was at this time to help repackage Jeff Jarrett and be able to be a part of this entourage. Tennessee Lee, great guy. And we felt that he could also help some of the younger talent watch their matches and give them some advice, but he was strictly here as a talent and to be a spokesman for Jeff.
I asked, was he strictly a talent? Kind of catch everybody up to what the Fuller's history in the business may have been, though some of our younger fans may not know.
Well, his dad was Roy Lee Welch, I believe. I think I have it right. It's a long lineage, long history of the family. And his brother Ron was a very successful promoter. They owned the Alabama territories, Continental Wrestling, second, third generation wrestlers and promoters in the wrestling business, very famous wrestling family. So Robert had a long pedigree behind him.
He had a long pedigree in front of him too. D'Lo Brown pinned X-Pac in 8.5 minutes. Dave wrote, this was originally to be a European title match, but was then switched to a non-title match. I guess for no other reason than to telegraph that Waltman was going to win, but then have him lose. They announced X-Pac at 202 pounds, which is a lot more reasonable than the 222 they announced him at on the previous pay-per-view. How do you respond to that? This is not something we've talked about before, but obviously you guys would fudge the weights. Was there some sort of conversation that you recall of when you heard a weight and somebody said, fuck, that doesn't even sound believable. Let's ratchet that back a little bit next time. Maybe not this one in particular, but any throughout your days in the business?
Oh, that absolutely happened. That happened with 245. He's not 205, but it would take Vince having to hear it.
I say
at some time, but usually it would also be when somebody would go out, how much do they weigh? And Vince would go 245 the first time. And then he would hear it and look at him later on and think, not even soaking wet. So that happened quite often, but
so that's what I wanted to ask. The announcer at this point is being told by who these guys' weights? Vince McMahon personally?
Sometimes it would be Vince. Sometimes it would be the agent. They may ask in a production meeting, or they may go up to an agent after the fact. Sometimes they would go up to the talent. The talent would just say, oh yeah, I'm 238. Okay. Do.
There you go. Meltzer wrote the match had no heat, and he says that X-Pac took a really fast and hard bump into the corner. Brown misses a moonsault, and the finish saw Kama hit X-Pac with a clothesline. X-Pac turns around and decks Kama, and when he turns back around, he walks into what they're calling a sky high, which is Brown's really cool version of a power bomb for the pin. Considering how good a worker X-Pac is and how Brown is getting his first real career push and is a good worker himself, this was pretty disappointing. Those are Meltzer's words. He gives it a 1.25 stars. What'd you think of the match, Bruce?
I enjoyed the hell out of it. I thought it was damn good. They had an issue and people were into it. I thought people were into it, and I forgot oh my God, how young those guys were. Holy cow, D'Lo Brown looked like a little kid.
I loved D'Lo Brown. He was a guilty pleasure of mine. I loved his reaction afterwards when he's kind of surprised that he kept the belt. I thought that was awesome. D'Lo was really great here.
Both guys were. I thought it was an outstanding match. And for Meltzer to say there was no heat, that this was just average, FDM.
So let's kind of remind you here, of course, D'Lo and Kama are, and they're calling him the godfather of the nation at this point. They are a part of the Nation of Domination, of course, and X-Pac is a part of DX. So that's kind of match one in our DX versus Nation of Domination feud. Next up, we go to the control center, I guess you'd call it, in the back. They were doing this WWF.com gimmick with Kevin Kelly with a goatee next to a Prichard in a crazy shirt, and it's not you. How did Dr. Tom work his way into an on-camera position here? Because this doesn't feel like something he was doing a lot of the time.
He was actually working behind the scenes on the WWF.com. He was also training guys. But behind the scenes on WWF.com, he was helping them with a lot of stuff. So as oftentimes would happen, put him on air. Just kind of threw it out there.
How do you think Tom did here? At times it looked like he was a little uncomfortable, or he wasn't exactly sure what they expected, which is kind of weird because when you go back and you look at his promos from back in the day, he was a hell of a promo, but I don't think he really knew what to do here sometimes.
No, somebody was giving him lines to say.
I see. And that somebody was?
Probably Vince Russo at that time.
I was hoping you were fucking with him, but yeah, in one of the scenes, you do see Vince Russo walking around behind the scenes there. He's on camera. You'd like to see Russo during that time.
I saw him.
The next thing I thought was a little weird is they do this weird fucking Terry Funk promo where he tries to retire and JBL calls him out on it. And he says, "No, it's just my last match for 6 months. I need to go home and recharge my batteries." What was the thinking here? That you guys were trying to set up some sort of JBL Terry Funk match on Raw or television in the future and create a little bit of "I'm not ready for you to leave" animosity between the two?
That was it. And Terry also at the time was looking for an out and thought, I'll put the big cowboy over and I'll just go back to the farm, back to the ranch for a little bit because your mother's a whore.
Oh my gosh. This match is pretty fun to watch because it feels like, this is so 1998 WWF. Check this out. You've got Farouk tagging with Too Cold Scorpio against Terry Funk and Bradshaw. Man, what a fucking group that is. They go just under 7 minutes, and Meltzer was pretty critical. Of course, he's a huge Funk fan. He says, it's very clear WWF, like Funk and Vader, jobbing to the lowest ranked young guys in the company to send the message that even the old guys who were great are passé. It was bad enough the night before to see Funk work an opener, because while in the sports world it is true that 54 is a bit long in the tooth, he was still far and away the most entertaining performer in the match. In the entertainment world, which the WWF claims to be in, a Hall of Fame entertainer, whether it be Sinatra or Mick Jagger, who is past his prime, is still not put in the embarrassing position to be an opening act or used to put over a musical version of Mark Henry or Bradshaw. Funk announced it would be his last match for 6 months because he's all beat up, and Bradshaw acted pissed because this is supposedly the first he's heard about it and went to the ring with a bad attitude. No heat again. What do you think of Meltzer's assessment here? I think this is kind of weird because and I'm not claiming to know everything about wrestling, but isn't the idea that the older guys, when they're winding down their career, put over the younger guys? Isn't that kind of the way it's always been done?
If you listen to the quotes that you just read out, you can see the speaking out of both sides of his mouth. It's also the reason why Dave Meltzer never has and never could be successful promoting and or running a wrestling company. But yes, that is what the old timers and what a veteran does, is they try to help get young talent over. The same, he would probably say the same thing if it was an old timer that he didn't like, that we put over due to nostalgia. Oh, why did they shouldn't have done that? Old timers are there to put the young talent over. And why did they bury this young talent that's up and coming when this guy should be put out to pasture a long time ago? So again, Meltzer's never promoted a wrestling card in his life. He's never booked one. And I dare say with that philosophy, I understand why, because he wouldn't be able to draw flies.
He definitely has his favorites, and you can see in his writing, and I'm a 20-year subscriber. But if you change the name in here from Terry Funk to Hulk Hogan, this would read like something Meltzer would never read. Meltzer was consistently burying Hogan for not putting over the younger guys. But here he's saying that Terry Funk shouldn't be in this position. And I just find that fascinating. This is a fun match for me. And if you're not going to watch this show for everything else, watch it for this, because this is such a fun group of guys here. And you see Terry Funk doing some pretty innovative stuff, especially at his age. At one point, it looks like he's going to try to moonsault from the apron out to the floor. He gets to the second rope and then just does like a Vader bomb onto Scorpio to the ground. It's really kind of all over the place. Bradshaw is a big rough and tumble dude. And you forget, I've seen Scorpio in so many WCW matches I've been watching lately for What Happened When with Tony Schiavone right here on MLWradio.com on Mondays, that I had, remembered how big he was. This is a big boy doing all these, aerial moves. But then you see him in the ring with Bradshaw and you realize, well, that's another level. Bradshaw's a man and a half here. And this is kind of fun. I recommend everybody go check this out. You see Scorpio do some hot moves, especially for the time. Ultimately, it winds up with Scorpio pinning Funk after he does the 450 splash. And then Bradshaw attacks Funk after the match. Scorpio comes back to try to save him, and he takes a lariat on the floor from Bradshaw, and Scorpio cuts a flip like Dolph Ziggler style, which is really saying something because Scorpio's a big boy. Meltzer would write, while Bradshaw still comes off as an uncharismatic, overpushed, bland WWF big guy type, his work has really gotten better this year. Is that the most backhanded compliment ever? When Farouk tried to make the save, Bradshaw clocked him with a hard chair shot to the back, star and 1/4. He gave this a terrible rating. Maybe it's because I'm a mark for Terry Funk, but I enjoyed this match. What'd you think?
Well, also you got family versus family in the match. So that was a big deal too. Terry Funk and Flash Funk.
Sure. I mean, it's no different than Kurt Angle and Jason Jordan.
There you go.
Very similar. I didn't know until today. What was Scorpio's mom?
What
was Scorpio's mom?
She was a whore. I got to tell you, Conrad, a story real quick. I'm going to digress here for a second. On my show, I believe we were in Manchester. This young man comes up and I look out in the audience and he has an elderly woman with him. And I asked someone, I said, does that guy have his mother with him? And they said, yes, that's his mom. They come to our shows.
I love this so much.
And they come up and they're in the VIP thing. And I asked the kid, I said, is that your mom? And he says, yes. And she comes up to me and I said, I apologize, ma'am, because you're going to hear some really horrible, horrible things tonight. She says, well, maybe I'll learn something. And I open up the show with, this young man brought his mother to the show tonight. Your mother's a whore. So I thought the match was fun. I thought that the match was, for nostalgia, for me, I enjoyed watching it much more today than I probably did then, because you get to see the evolution of Bradshaw and Farouk. And I enjoy watching Terry Funk perform.
We should throw this out here. If you'd like for Bruce to call your mother a whore, come join us, livenation.com, Philadelphia, this weekend. He would be happy to tell her to her face what's going on.
Yes, I will.
A lot of the stuff we cover on this show, you can actually find clips of on YouTube. And I know that we see lots of links for that over on our Facebook page. But one of the things I want to recommend you do while you're checking out YouTube, looking at some of these clips, is go check out our friends over at GoPro Wrestling. Even go ahead and subscribe. That's what I did. And I did it because of all the great free content that you can see on there. They've got lots of new interviews over at GoPro Wrestling as well. Specifically, part 1 of a lengthy Shane Douglas interview. He holds nothing back and shares a lot on all his time in the WWE and the ECW. I've never heard some of the stuff that they covered on GoPro Wrestling. They've even got a 1-hour interview with Vader. He opens up about having 2 years to live and even fires off a couple of shots at Paul Orndorff. You get to hear Greg the Hammer Valentine riff on his old tag team partner, Brutus the fucking Barber Beefcake. Many more in the archives: DDP, Maria Bennett, Demolition from last week's show, Lex Luger, and even the uncomfortable Billy Gunn interview. It's so much more. You can always check out all the free interviews over there and the great original content, including like 4 hours of Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Tony Atlas. Go check it out. Hit the subscribe button. It's GoPro Wrestling on YouTube. My buddy Andrew is even giving away free stuff to random winners every week. All you've got to do is subscribe to GoPro Wrestling YouTube channel at youtube.com/GoPro Wrestling. That's youtube.com/GoPro Wrestling. And just turn on your notifications. Then share the channel with your buddies online and show your support. It's free. Subscribe right now. It's youtube.com/GoPro Wrestling.
Hey there, fans of Something to Wrestle With. Would you like to get a couple awesome shirts from your favorite wrestling podcast for as little as a $5 donation to the great cause of helping kids get access to the best musical education? My name is Matt, and I started a locally owned and nationally known music school in Central Virginia. One of our missions is to be able to provide lessons regardless of whether or not the child can afford it or not. We have started a fund at musicoutreach.org to help us with this important mission of bringing music education to all. For fans of our podcasts, we have a special offer to take place over the next month, Friday, July 14th through Monday, August 14th. Any fan of Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard or What Happened When Monday with Tony Schiavone who donates $5 or more in that period will be eligible to receive 2 t-shirts of their choice from What Happened When or Something to Wrestle. That includes Damn I'm Good, Huh, No Yob, Chicken Salad, Glass Bottom Boat, or any of the great new shirts available at the What Happened When or Something to Wrestle With t-shirt store. All you have to do is make a donation of $5 or more to musicoutreach.org and you will be entered to win a prize of any 2 t-shirts of your choice from What Happened When Monday with Tony Schiavone or Something to Wrestle With. Money should never be a reason that someone does not get access to music education. Thanks and have a great day. Now back to the show.
Next up, and this is kind of fun. Our next match. I don't know why we're going to talk about this. We've talked about it in long form before. Mark Henry pins Vader in about 5 minutes. With the exception of the finish, this was move for move, the same match they did the previous night in San Francisco. That comes to us directly from the Wrestling Observer newsletter, which tells us that Dave went to the house show in San Fran. He says that Henry seems to freeze here and they screw up a lot of spots early and have a lot less heat. Henry has screwed up the timing on the first body slam and the match fell apart from there. The finish saw Vader splash Henry off the middle rope, but Henry kick out. And then Henry delivered a power slam and a big splash, but Vader didn't kick out. Clearly, it's time for Vader to move on. But at this stage of his career, there may be nowhere left to go. He gave it a 0.5 star. We covered this long form on our Vader episode. Is there anything else to add here that we haven't already discussed about Vader in the WWF?
I made notes while I went through this show, and I have one word written next to this match.
Which is?
Horrible.
Yeah. Is that because of Vader, or is that Mark Henry being green at the time? Mark Henry now is a much better worker, not dumping on Mark Henry or his doo-doo sandwiches. But I feel like that's a shirt. Was Vader to blame here in your worldview, or was this just clash of styles, poor matchmaking? I mean, I don't know who wanted to see a fucking Vader Mark Henry match. This doesn't feel like this is anything the audience would be bought in for.
I certainly didn't want to watch it again, but I did out of the car crash mentality. And it was a clash of styles. It was probably Leon not really wanting to do the favor per se, but definitely a clash of styles between Mark and Vader, and not a lot of cooperation there on either side.
You know, I need to go back a match. I don't know how I missed this. Go watch that Scorpio match again. Scorpio does a leg drop off the second rope, like all the way across the fucking ring. I had to like rewind it to see that again. This fucker got on the second rope and went like almost like a Van Terminator to the other side of the ring just for a leg drop. And there is a spot in that match where Ron Simmons catches JBL coming off the top and power slams him. You're a man and a half to catch JBL and power slam him. That was super impressive to me. I know I'm a mark for that match. Either way, wanted to get my shit in there, pal. Next up, we've got Mankind, Kane, and Paul Bearer. They come out for an in-ring promo in the middle of a pay-per-view. This is where we are in 1998. Vince Russo thought this was what people were paying to see, and it's hard to argue that he wasn't right. Would you agree with that, Bruce? Because people wanted to feel like the Gaga was a part of the show, and it was a big part in 98.
And it worked. So I thought it worked, and it was a part of the show, and they wanted more of that. So instead of doing more backstage stuff, we did more live in front of the audience.
They're running a storyline here that the Undertaker has not showed up. They don't know where he is, and he's not in the building yet. And Bear, of course, is calling him a coward. All of a sudden, the New Age Outlaws music hits. Road Dogg comes out. They get a good little reception. He does his normal routine. He looks like Pineapple Willie. And it's funny to me because when I see these guys, and let's kind of run through who's in the ring or in the shot at one point. You've got Billy Gunn, Road Dogg Jesse James, Kane, Mick Foley, and Paul Bearer. And if I was to tell you in 2017 and you look back to 1998, one of these guys in the ring is going to be one of the heads of creative and run SmackDown. The last fucking person you would pick to be that guy is Road Dogg Jesse James. Would you agree with that, Bruce?
My last guy would have been Billy Gunn, but Road Dogg would have been next to him.
It's just amazing to me because there's all this rumor and innuendo about their personal struggles individually. And, you know, you could see maybe Paul Bearer sticking around to run that. Obviously, Foley. I mean, Kane's going to be the fucking mayor. Any of those guys, you got it. But you think, oh, well, it's going to be this guy. He's going to run it. You just don't see that. I don't see that.
You've already got slots in the company for the other guys.
Right.
And then you're looking at Billy and Road Dogg and think, okay, you know, they're here for their run. And it's going to be good. But Road Dogg, he's been in the business his entire life. He's got a great head for the business. It was his other demons and everything else that you sat there and went, he ain't going to make it.
Right. Now, yeah, that's not to shit on his creative genius or his contributions to the business. I'm just saying at the time, what the rap on these guys was, you're like, well, it gonna be this motherfucker. But it's awesome. It's just fun to look at that now in hindsight. So of course they come out and they challenge Mankind and Kane because they want a tag team title match and they want it the next night on Raw. This turns into a pull apart brawl. And this of course is a misdirection, a swerve, bro, because it makes you think that Mankind and Kane are going to retain. And so how could they have a title match the next night unless they were going to retain the belts? So next up, we get DOA, the Disciples of Apocalypse, Ron and Don Harris, and they've got Paul Ellering here with them, and Paul's riding a motorcycle, and they beat LOD 2000 in just under 9 minutes. And I watched this with a friend of mine, and he pointed it out. I guess I just wasn't really paying that close of attention. He said, man, look at Hawk. What the fuck? This is such a departure. You look at this version of Hawk in 1998, and you go back in time, you know, just a handful of years. Let's go back a decade, and you look at Hawk in 1988. These look like totally different people. Would you agree with that?
I would. It's funny that was your takeaway, because when I watched it, my takeaway was, holy cow, look at Animal and how great Animal looked.
Yes.
And the way that Animal was moving in the ring. I couldn't remember him moving that good before.
Right.
He looked great. He was moving. He was running. I was thinking, oh my God, I don't remember that.
I think that is why maybe Hawk stood out so much to me, is by comparison, you know, Hawk was always more of the body guy. And now you look at it and Animal looks better and Animal's outworking him. And once upon a time, people thought Hawk could have been the single star. But here, I mean, they live totally different lives, and we'll cover that, I'm sure, one day here on the show. But Animal looks like $1 million, and Hawk looks like he needs $1. It's not good.
It was a sad time for them, and it was tough to watch, and it was tough to see that decline, knowing that there wasn't a whole lot you could do. We tried. We really did try. And Animal, I think, probably even overcompensated a little bit as you look through it, to where you're sitting there going, man, this is sad for Animal too.
Meltzer says the match had no heat at all. He didn't really like the match. He gave it a 1/4 star. He wrote, and we should mention that the finish to this match comes when they do the switcheroo with the twins, Ron and Don, and the fresh guy gives a DDT to Animal. Animal takes the DDT like a champ, and that's the finish. And Meltzer kind of takes issue with that. They were missing spots left and right in the last few minutes. Again, the pattern in its third match in a row of wrestling legends going down to clean but weak finishers. What has killed LOD besides themselves is that whole aura was based on not doing jobs. And in this environment, they can't be protected like that anymore. But in the WWF, the most overdone maneuver in the entire federation is the DDT. And nobody ever loses to it. So when LOD loses to it, it just leaves them that much more dead. He gives it a 1/4 star. What do you think of that? It is kind of uncommon for a DDT to be a finish. We haven't really seen that as a big finishing move at this point in the WWF since Jake Roberts. And lots of guys are using DDTs as almost like transitional moves. But when the DOA do it, Animal's done. What'd you think of the match? What'd you think of the finish? Is this fair treatment for one of the all-time greats in the Road Warriors?
Well, as I said in the beginning, this was on my list of top 2 worst matches of the night, and it wasn't good. What Meltzer is saying there holds true, but really what he missed is if you watch the show up until this point, even in the last the match with Scorpio and those guys, the DDT was used so many times just in this show,
right,
that it was overdone. And that is a function of the agents and production that guys should have communicated and let people know what the hell they were doing. And if the other guys had known that a DDT was going to be used as a finish, make sure that nobody else uses a DDT as a high spot, much less 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 DDTs before you get to that match. And that's simply that's all on production, and that's on the agents and the talent not knowing what the other guys were doing. And it's on the agents and the guys in that particular match saying, hey, these guys used 6 DDTs earlier in the night. Let's change our finish and come up with something else. So without realizing what the hell he was saying, he's correct in his analogy. And that's why it stuck out so bad. But the match was not good by any stretch of the imagination. They tried. Sucked. Didn't work.
Vince McMahon came out next with Pat Patterson, Gerald Briscoe, and Sergeant Slaughter. They're teasing the idea here that The Undertaker is going to have to no-show. And they do kind of a slick deal here where they have Vince reach into his coat pocket right in your very ring, or in this very ring, and says, in your very own program, you'll see, and at the bottom he reads the fine print, that the card is subject to change if a performer can't make it. The promoter reserves the right to a suitable replacement. And he refers to himself as the promoter, which I thought was fun. And he gives the fans a suitable main event sub since Undertaker's not here. And he brings out the Brooklyn Brawler. Brawler runs around, hugs everybody in the ring. I thought this came off pretty good. I know it's a pay-per-view, so it's kind of unconventional. You would think that this happens more on a Raw, but I love this version of Vince McMahon and saying he's going to bring out the Brooklyn Brawler to tag with Stone Cold Steve Austin. What'd you think of this segment?
I had to laugh at it because I would go back to when I would try and convince Vince. People know you're the promoter and they know you own the company, Vince. I'm just a commentator. I'm the play-by-play guy. That's how they view me. For him to actually embrace it, and it was the most hated character. Everybody hates the promoter. Everybody hates the boss with all the money. And when he truly embraced it and you could actually use all those assholeian techniques to your advantage, it was good. And I give Russo credit for being able to utilize all of that stuff, but it was something that we had been trying to tell Vince for so many years. Hey, Vince, they know. Okay, especially in the Northeast, they know. And just to pull that out, I thought it was expertly done. It was hilarious, and it works.
Let's talk about the next match, because this is one that a lot of people remember as being kind of one of the calling cards of this pay-per-view. Owen Hart beats Ken Shamrock in about 5 minutes. This happens in Stu Hart's basement. They call it the Dungeon. It's right there in Calgary. And allegedly it was recorded a few days earlier. And this is kind of tough to do. You know, you don't have the benefit of playing to a crowd. You don't even have a ring. And Meltzer says they worked very stiff and believable, at least by WWF standards. And it was real good for what it was. What do you think of this? This is kind of an interesting idea. Whose idea was it? How did y'all pitch it? Were Owen and Stu receptive? When was it shot? Give me some details about who put this together.
We were looking for something different for Shamrock. And I want to say that it was Owen Hart's idea originally to say, what if we did a match in the Dungeon? We were looking at that, what the hell did we call it? The Lion's Den?
Yeah.
Our little octagon type thing that we came up with Shamrock. But I think that came at a later date.
Yeah.
I want to say it was Owen's idea because it was a way for Owen to go over in his environment, and it didn't hurt the shooter or the reputation of Ken Shamrock. Hindsight being 2020, when I went back and watched it, I thought it was magnificently done. And I always tell guys, whenever you're doing a backstage segment or you're away from an audience, man, you know, hey guys, apologize now. You got to lay it in.
Yep. They did.
Otherwise, it's going to look like shit. These guys beat the crap out of each other. It was believable. And if you were an MMA guy or a shoot fighter, you would buy it. And a sports entertainment fan would sit there and go, hey, they gave me some of my stuff too. But you believed it. And throwing Severn in there, I thought that Dan played his part magnificently as well. But that's a hard thing to do. And also, the other little subtle difference was it was a 2-camera shoot in an extremely confined area. So they did some good cuts and they edited it and they added, sound effects to make it a little bit better than it might have been if you were just to watch the damn thing raw and try to cut that live. It would have been a nightmare.
Who shot it? Who produced it? All that.
Okay, you're going to be hot at this. I have no idea. And I've talked to 3 different people today and asked and said, hey man, who went and did that? It was television production people. They had one of the cameramen was actually from Calgary. I remember that much. And I think that we either had Dirk, who was one of our handheld guys, or Marty. But I think that we had one of our handheld guys, and then we had a local guy from Calgary. But I can't find anybody that remembers who the wrestling producer was on it that went there. It was shot, I think, the Thursday or Friday before the Sunday pay-per-view.
So this looks painful, as we said. One of the highlights for me is they're both slamming each other's heads into the wall, the wood paneling. And at one point, Owen is really wearing Ken out. And Ken gets in the mode. And even when Owen lets go, Ken throws himself into the wall one more time, which is super funny to me. Did you see that?
I did. And you hear in the wall shots in particular, you go back and they just enhanced the sound.
Right.
That was funny because if you remember, Ken is shoving Owen into the hall. So Owen's taking those bumps with his back.
Right.
Owen's shoving Ken in the wall. Ken's taking him with his damn head.
It was super
they beat
fun.
The hell out of each other. And then the spot where they go up and Owen picks Ken up and runs his head through the wall. Priceless. Through the ceiling.
Yeah. But which is clearly not the first time that's happened because there's lots of other holes there. But the spot right before he put him through the ceiling, Owen kind of like tries to Irish whip him. And instead of just staying on the ground for seemingly no fucking reason at all, Shamrock takes flight and jumps into the air simply to hit his own head against the pipe.
The pipe, yeah.
It's silly, stupid, and it's fun.
Oh my God, but hats off to those guys to go out there and beat the living crap out of each other in that unforgiving dungeon. And the production team coming back and taking it, and the cuts were good because they did have to stop it down sometimes and get in a different place because one of the cameramen were not our usual cameramen. And the space was so damn tight that you had to maneuver around to do a lot of crazy shit to make it happen.
Have you been to the dungeon before?
No, never. I've never been to the Hart family house.
It's kind of weird because this is one of those famed houses that we as wrestling fans have always heard about. We've always heard about this dungeon. And then you see it and you kind of felt like, or at least I did. I was like, well, that's not what I was expecting. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a fucking basement, but I don't know. It's one of those things you just kind of hype up in your head.
Let me see your hand, you big bastard. Yeah. You know, I can take your finger and put it back here. Yeah.
He would love you. He'd fucking have you screaming uncle in no time.
I'm sure
Have
he
I told
would.
the priest story?
No.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm going to digress. There's a famous Hart family. I think it was in Wrestling with Shadows about Stu Hart. And there was rumor of a priest locally in Calgary that might have been inappropriate with some young boys. And so Stu invited the priest over to the house to have a chat with him. And Stu took him downstairs in the dungeon. And as legend goes, Stu stretched the priest, and the priest screamed so much that you could hear it all over. But Owen taped the priest screaming.
Yeah, perverted bastard. Did the boys, little boys, scream like that when you had them down in your parish, you sick, perverted fuck? Ah!
And this went on for like an hour before Stu finally released the priest back into the real world.
Well, good for him.
So that was a famous story. I think it was in Wrestling with Shadows. That was.
I like Stu a lot better now. The end of this is kind of fun because Severn takes a bump. Owen picks up weight, hits Ken in the face. Ken's unconscious, face down. Owen puts him in a submission move. Magically, Severn wakes up, and Owen is tapping for Shamrock, which is kind of fun to see. He gave it 3 stars. I liked it. Bruce liked it. You should check it out. Next up, we've got Rocky Maivia. He retains the Intercontinental title, going to a 30-minute draw with Hunter Hearst Helmsley in a 2 out of 3 falls match. Meltzer would say this is probably the longest match of either man's career, and under the circumstances, they worked real hard and did a good job. It's a real risk in today's environment booking a match this long, unless you have a super worker, preferably 2 super workers in there. The match had its weaknesses because it went so long and didn't have 1 super worker, but it was still worlds better than when ECW has sent its guys out there for too long a match. The first key spot was when Mizark Henry came out and gave Triple H a splash on the floor. Billy Gunn ran out to run Henry off, and then Maivia hit Triple H with a lariat, but Triple H kicks out. Rocky hits a nice swinging neck breaker for a rear naked fall, and there were loud, boring chants as Maivia held a chin lock. Bruce, when you've got a guy who's kind of young in his career, like Rocky is at this point, when you've got these boring chants, is this something you think he tries to panic for, or is the referee trying to calm him down, or is this just business as usual and he's still sticking with the story, so to speak, no matter what?
Business as usual. And frankly, the advice that he would have been given is if they started chanting boring, sit there in that hole. I would sit there and just let them chant. The next time that I moved and got up, they're going to be happy, but I never would give in to a boring chant. But I thought he handled it really well, and didn't panic at all. It just simply that's what you're taught to do.
So you get more interference. Kama's out, the Outlaws are out, and Maivia eventually hits a rock bottom for the first pin after about 20 minutes. Eventually, we see another pin when Maivia is given a low blow from China and gets a DDT on the chair. So Triple H gets a pin, and now there's only about 2 minutes left, and the crowd is maybe not as into it here. The usual reaction is that the crowd would get hyped up. But for whatever reason, that didn't really happen in the last 2 minutes here. They try for the finish, at least the timing, where Triple H would hit the pedigree and then the bell would ring, but they just barely miss it, according to Meltzer, by 4 seconds. And after the match, the Nation attacks Triple H, but DX makes the save. He gives it 3.25 stars. So this is kind of the summer of Triple H and The Rock. Both of these guys have been in their respective roles as gang members. They're not really the star. Of course, Nation of Domination, Farouk's supposed to be the star. DX, Shawn Michaels is supposed to be the star. As time goes on, those leaders kind of fall by the wayside, and Triple H and The Rock become more of the featured guys. And they're going to have a big match at SummerSlam, a ladder match. And this feud continues for years and years and years. And later that year, The Rock becomes the man at Survivor Series and becomes the world champion. Did you guys know at this point in July of 98 that there was something special about these two guys, this feud, all the above?
100% with Rock, because the rumbling and the rumblings of The Rock every time that he put a microphone in his hand, you couldn't ignore it.
Right.
And as far as Triple H and The Rock going back and forth, it was magic. There was a natural rivalry there, and they made magic in the ring. Going back, kind of a critique on this match, probably why I say it's tied for my favorite match, not my favorite. There's a big production at the very beginning of the match to get DX out and then to get the Nation out. And then to run everybody back in, and it's a swerve this and a swerve that. There was too much of it. There was just too much of it for my taste. The other thing is when you've got the multiple falls, there was no big production on the falls for the first two falls. So it didn't mean as much when you get to the time, and they weren't building it up as much for the live audience. There wasn't a countdown clock. People didn't know, and they didn't ring the damn bell. JR's counting you down, but for the live house, it's like Hunter hits the pedigree, and then Earl's stopping the match. Well, how does Earl know? You don't have a clock up there, and a bell doesn't ring. So the finish was flat, and people didn't understand what the hell was going on. And it took an explanation. If you have to explain it, then that's not always the best. But hats off, both guys worked their ass off, and the match itself was good. I just think as far as doing 2 out of 3 fall matches in the time limit, there's a way to do that. It's a tried and true traditional way to do it that works, which is why you do it that way. And we strayed from that.
And you think that is more on the performers, the agent, the booker?
I think that is more on somebody asking someone, like probably, and I don't know this, but I do know this is an example of how it's happened in the past, of somebody saying to a Vince Russo or a Vince McMahon, okay, when we ring the bell for the first fall, do you want an announcement? Why would you ring the bell? The match isn't over yet. They've got 2 more falls. Or why would you ring the bell, bro? That's stupid. Just keep going. There wasn't a definitive ending and a restart. Does that make sense?
Right.
You just kept going. So that fall that just happened, you kind of forget about it as it goes on because there wasn't a big enough deal made about it. So I just think presentation sometimes there's a lack of thought to the details. And in this case, I think that the details were missed by the presentation here. And they knew the spot for the time, but there was no clock up there for them to look at. And there was no bell. It just ended.
Weird deal. 3.25 stars. It gets an okay review from Meltzer, but I can't recommend it. It wasn't necessarily for me. Let's talk about Dustin Runnels. He's out next, and he's introduced as Dustin Runnels, not as Goldust, not as Dustin Rhodes, but as Dustin Runnels. And he comes out and starts praying to the Lord to forgive the fans and participants for what they're about to see. He's praying for everybody. And he says at the end, the Messiah is coming very soon, so you better be ready. What's going on here? This doesn't, I don't understand what we're looking at here.
I don't either. I totally forgot it until I watched it again, and it was an attempt to get Dustin over as himself and try something different. Only problem is, when I did Brother Love, I never did religion.
Right.
Here they just did religion. Religion doesn't work in our business. It doesn't work in any form of entertainment, frankly, in my opinion. And it was ill-placed. People didn't know how to take it. They were uncomfortable. And then you go right from Dustin to Lawler, and it's, what the hell did I just look at?
It feels like it's, and obviously, I mean, I think it's fair to say this was Russo's booking, right?
Probably so. It was an attempt to get Dustin over without the Goldust gimmick.
I'm just saying it feels weird. And obviously they're trying to do anything here with Goldust. This is probably around the time when he's saying, hey, I'll get implants, I'll do whatever.
Yes. Desperate.
But it's kind of weird knowing that Russo, what his beliefs are now. And here he has Dustin doing this. And then immediately we've got Lawler losing his mind about
puppies.
What we're about to see. We've got Jackie out next. How would you describe what Jackie's wearing? How would you describe what Jackie's wearing?
When she came out, Mark Merrow's robe.
Okay, she's
Marco. What? No, I'm sorry.
Merrow. By the way, this is the coolest look for Marvelous Mark Merrow so far. The Wild Man thing was kind of corny. Obviously, Johnny B. Bad was whatever. But he looks like a hateable character here as Marvelous Mark Merrow. I enjoyed it anyway.
Because he was just Mark Merrow.
It's phenomenal. It's
easily
phenomenal.
hateable.
Easily hateable. So talk to me about when she makes the big reveal. Obviously, she teases it, but before she gets an opportunity, Sable comes out. But let's talk about her reveal first. What do you think of what Jackie was wearing, this one-piece red situation?
I thought she looked fantastic.
I didn't ask how she looked. I mean, what's the involvement here? I want to hear what this sounds like. Does Vince Russo pick this out? What's the instruction given? Like, okay, so we've got a plan, Jackie. We need you to go shopping. Are you familiar with Fredericks of Hollywood? Well, if you could go there and then cut the outfit in half.
Dude, they don't sell that at Fredericks of Hollywood.
You had to go to a strip club for that.
Yeah, that was more at Candy's Strip Clubs R Us down the street here. It was, but the girl, that was left to the girls too, frankly. And when they were given an opportunity to show off their body and they had time to prepare, they loved to show off their bodies. So they trained hard. They would go out. Okay, there's always that sense of pride. I go back to the pose down between Superstar Billy Graham and Butch Reed, and Superstar wasn't in shape, and Butch Reed took such great pride in going out knowing he looked better than Billy Graham, and Billy Graham was supposed to go over. The girls take pride in that. They want to really make people choose. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Because it was Jackie wanting to go out and say, I'm going to look good. They're going to have to hate me because I'm a heel, not because I look bad. So it was her choice.
Well, it's an interesting situation here because this would obviously never play here, but there is a nipple spot here. And this is not the first time that we've talked about it here on the show because we specifically named another. But as she's
100% accidental.
Okay. That's what I wanted to hear because Meltzer, of course, didn't say that. Here's what he says. Jackie came out wearing a stripper's G-string. Both women deserve credit as they had obviously trained very hard and dieted very hard for this. Both women's implants looked even more than usually fake on a dieted down frame. We could see the dreaded nipple shot from Jackie, which of course was played up as not supposed to happen, but clearly the camera was right there for it and it was a planned high spot. You disagree?
That's 100% not true.
Were you in Gorilla when this happened?
Yes. And also the girls were, obviously Sable's hands weren't going to go anywhere, but no, Jackie was taped down as much as she could be taped down.
Does anybody inspect her before she goes out? Does anybody say, hey, let us see what you got? Or is this a surprise for everybody?
No, everybody had to see what she was wearing before she went out, and the makeup artist is the one that used to tape them down.
Okay. Are the boys surrounded? Are they all surrounding a monitor here to watch this?
Probably so. I was at Gorilla, but I'm sure there was a sellout at the monitor.
When the deal moves and the gimmick plops out, what's Vince's reaction?
Chocolate milk. There's a like, oh, and a holy shit, and get off of that. But yeah, it was not good. Not something we wanted to see. But not that we didn't want to see it. It's just that we didn't want to see it on TV.
You know. Sable comes out wearing a halter top, claiming, of course, that her evil boss, the evil Mr. McMahon, has told her to dress conservatively. But she says this is her conservative, and that it's live TV, and that it's freedom of expression, and she's going to express herself. And she removes her top and has on nothing, of course, except body paint with hands over her breasts. So it's been painted on to look like there are hands grabbing her breasts, and they cover her nipples. Mero acts like he's furious, takes a bump and from a slap. And then McMahon runs out and puts his jacket over Sable and sends her to the back as the party pooper for everybody. Sable, of course, gets more cheers from Lawler in the crowd, so she is awarded the win. Meltzer says, even though Jacqueline probably had the better body of the two, but they were both in great shape, so it's all a matter of taste. And if you thought it was tasteless, it was, but you haven't learned. That's like reading reviews of a Dirty R movie and taking kids to see it and then complaining afterwards when you knew ahead of time what it was going to be. I don't have a problem with them presenting the product the way they do, because this is business for profit. And at this point, it's working. The day it stops working is the day they should change. What do you think of that assessment from Dave Meltzer?
Well, first of all, I'd like to go back to the implant comment that was made. And you being a connoisseur of implants, if you will, and I've been known to have seen a few through the years. I thought that both ladies look quite nice.
Listen, there's nobody who wasn't a fan of this at the time. I mean, obviously, this is something you could never do in 2017. But man, the 16-year-old version of me thought this was as roll tide as it gets.
Well, and quite frankly, folks, if you like it in 2017, you can still go back and revisit it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not bad. But I take exception to that their implants didn't look that good. I thought they both looked great.
They look fake, but they're supposed to. You didn't pay all that money to look like they did before. Of course, they look fucking different. Now, let's talk about the hands, because we've covered this on the Vince Russo episode. Russo says that he was called to her locker room that day by Mark Mero, and that's when he saw that they had done the hands. So he kind of insinuates that Sable did that all on her own. Do you believe that to be true?
I think it might have been Sable's idea, actually.
It is kind of interesting because this is before body painting was such a big deal. You know, these days you go to a lot of festivals and stuff, and lots of people are doing this. But in '98, this is kind of ahead of the curve a little bit. Was there anybody who knew of this beforehand in the back who said, hey, we should not do this? This is not good for us.
There was a contingent that didn't like the whole exposing of the side boob, if you will. There were people that felt that was way too much.
Who felt that way?
There was a contingent that felt that the hands were way too much, and Vince just felt that, man, we're going to go for it. And that's what people want to see.
Who felt that way?
Vince McMahon.
Vince thought it was too far.
No. Vince McMahon said that's what people want to see. I don't remember any. I can't really think of anyone in particular that sticks out, but there was an underlying current of, those office people that would say, oh, well, are we going too far? And this was pay-per-view. And I'm probably speaking more to how we presented the women on TV from time to time, because I just remember side boob being this huge issue that you had to cover it up, and you could only show so much of the ass and all this stuff. like I said, these were outfits that were straight out of Candy's boutique. Strippers Are Us.
Let me ask you this. When you said side boob, that's a kind of a common phrase thrown around now. Were people calling it side boob in 1998 in these meetings, or were they saying
actually under boob?
Okay.
Time.
It's interesting to me because around this time, whenever the girls would bend down to get in the ring, you guys were shooting right up their skirts. I mean, I remember there were several times where Sunny would come out in like a schoolgirl outfit or whatever, and she would bend down to get in. I mean, it was like we were at a damn OBGYN meeting or something. You guys were trying to really get in there.
It's a peak. You get a little peek at the panties.
Thankfully, she didn't poot, which was good. Do you remember like who was directing that? Is Kevin Dunn on the headset saying, you know, get me more beef? Or what's is there a point in the meeting where somebody says, you know what we need? We need to see some camel toe. That's what we need. Do you remember these topics about pushing the envelope?
There were topics, and it was, let's see a sneak peek. And that was Vince's term. He was like, just, get a peek of it. And
don't be gratuitous, Kerwin. God damn.
So and Kerwin is in a tough spot. Kerwin Silky's his director, so he's in a tough spot. Give it enough, but not too much.
Right.
And so he would give something, and Vince, God damn, you got off that quick, pal. So he'd linger longer next time. God damn it, too much.
So it's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears with your beef shots. You need just the right amount.
Just the right amount of penny.
Do you guys have a heads up with the girls and you say, hey, we need you to, wear a thong and take your time, and you're going to see a cameraman. Don't shy away. Really back that ass up into that camera, honey. Who's giving that sort of direction to the female talent?
Girls are doing their things and we're covering it. That's it. But they were told, not to wear, especially later years, they're told not to wear G-strings. And Vince didn't like G-strings. And if you go back and watch on TV, they didn't wear G-strings. They wore, the stuff that covered part of the ass.
All right, so let's pivot for a minute from all the booty talk for just a minute, and let's talk about what we really need to talk about. Because I think the most famous spot from this whole show is this Sable spot. Would you agree with that?
Probably so, yeah.
And in the end, all this controversy could have been put aside. Sable just needed a shirt, and the place to get those shirts is BrucePrichard.com. Am I right, Bruce?
All kinds of shirt, any shirt that she would need it, because by God,
hey pal, we need to do something with your boobs because I used to be over and I need to get you over right now. You remember Brutus the fucking barber beefcake? Well, you can get a BTFBB or just fucking a something to wrestle with shirt. Hey pal, everything that you want, pronouns, pal. If you're a Bruce Prichard guy or a Conrad Thompson guy, you can get them all at brucepritchard.com. Do not put a T in my name. Put one on your back, by God.
I wasn't there. George the Rat, Ribomania, Rib still rule. I ain't scared of shit. I'm fired. Conrad still rules. Lots of fun stuff. Salad, Steel Cage, Punjabi Boss Man. Dick was everywhere. Blockomania. Get the T out. Don't vote for me, or don't blame me. I voted for Sherry. You're going to love it. Go check it out, BrucePrichard.com. And when you pick up a shirt, Bruce calls you eventually when he's not in Europe for a week. All right, let's go to the main event. Undertaker is tagging with Steve Austin. He's arrived at the building. They show him out of his gimmick, arrive in the building, just wearing his regular street garb, which was kind of uncharacteristic at the time. They started to kind of delve into that a little bit. And they're tagging, the good guys are here, with Stone Cold Steve Austin being the world champion, to take on Mankind and Kane. And they actually win the tag team titles here after about 17 and a half minutes. Meltzer would write that Austin worked very hard to carry the match for the other three. It was a better than average match, but well below the standards of a typical WWF pay-per-view main event. What did you think, Bruce? Overall, Meltzer would go on to rate it 2 3/4 stars. Of course, the finish comes when the Undertaker tombstones Kane for the pin, and then he grabs both tag belts and leaves, which leaves Austin without the belt. Of course, he's the world champion, but still. What'd you think of the match overall, and how did the guys work together here? And would you classify this as a weaker than normal main event?
Now, I thought it was great. I thought, again, maybe it's the atmosphere, but Austin was on fire, and Steve was moving around, and this was a perfect example of why Steve Austin was over to the extent that Steve Austin was over. His shit was solid. It was on point. He was all over the place. But also at the same time, you go back and you look at Glenn Jacobs' Kane, and he was flying and making both of those guys look great. And you go watch Undertaker give the 2 choke slams. He gives a choke slam to Kane. Kane gets almost up, all the way up to Undertaker's head for the choke slam. Mick gets up as best Mick could do at the time. This match was good. The story was good. Are they going to get along? Are they not going to get along? The fingers at the very beginning, it was simple. It was easy to understand. And it left you wanting more and wondering what the hell is going to happen tomorrow night.
Well, the night after the show, on July 27th, they're at the Pond in Anaheim. They draw a sellout, 12,019 fans, $285,675 is the gate. It's the largest non-WrestleMania gate ever in Southern California, and it even broke WCW's record from a couple weeks before. How exciting is this time of year for the WWF? This is record business seemingly every day.
It feels like every time you turn around, you're either setting a ratings record or you're drawing more than you have in the history of the business. And every single day is another milestone. So you're looking at, everybody's back looking at, okay, hey, what did we do? What did we do last time? What do we have to beat today? And look at it.
On that episode of Raw, they do a feature on Draws where he's doing like a Wayne's World knockoff called Draws' World. And it's mainly showing him playing with snakes and throwing up a lot. What do you remember about this Draws' World skit?
Trying to get Draws' personality, his real life personality outside of the ring over and get more of it on screen. Draws was a unique guy. So we wanted to get a little bit more of that personality out and get it on screen for him to maybe connect with the audience better.
On that same show, Meltzer would write, in a huge upset in the Brawl for All and probably the biggest shock in wrestling history of recent, Bart Gunn knocked out Steve Williams in 52 seconds of the 3rd round. Hear all about the Brawl for All in our Brawl for All episode, available now in the archives. The week after the pay-per-view, Meltzer would describe Brian Christopher like this. He wrote, "Christopher did a great job here and remains the most underutilized talent in the company." Bruce, why don't you think Brian Christopher got more of a push?
First of all, I think that Dave Meltzer should get a wrestling company and push Brian Christopher, because Brian Christopher was not the most dependable guy in the world. And there are a lot of other things than having a good match on a show that Dave Meltzer happens to write, like the moves and holds that he does.
He wrote, Kaientai and Yamaguchi were on the stage cutting salamis with butcher knives, basically acting like they were going to castrate Val. Should be noted that before the match, Val was getting ready to take a shower, and teenage Yamaguchi-san walked out of the shower. So once again, clearly for the record, she was not a teenager. Meltzer's reported this wrong over and over and over and over.
Over and over and over, Meltzer is once again completely 100% incorrect and wrong.
Well, there you go. I think we've hit that hard enough. Let's move on here. Kama, the very next night, was doing a pimp roll, coming out with 3 hoes. He teamed with Henry to beat LOD in 3 minutes and 49 seconds. Bruce, the idea of a pimp with hoes, that's Russo's, right?
It was something that was somewhat developed because of Godfather in real life. He had managed a strip club. Well, yeah, he had managed a strip club, still does. Cheetah's in Las Vegas. If you go to Cheetah's, you can probably see him there today. He was the Godfather, and people looked at him that way. He was referred to as the Godfather in the nation, and it was something that fit him. And so just go ahead and make it an on-screen character, because the documentary Pimpin' Ain't Easy, what is it? Pimps Up, Hose Down was very popular at the time, and why not make him a pimp?
Here's something else from the Observer. The gimmick is that Hawk was stoned out of his mind. Can you believe they're doing a rehab gimmick? And with Hawk of all people, what's next? Having one of the steroid freaks do a liver cancer gimmick? He tripped getting in the ring, fell asleep in the corner, and fell off the top rope as they went for the finish, with Animal working the entire match. I wasn't sure if this was meant as a spoof of Hall or Rodman, probably a little bit of both. Well, at least this is an explanation for all the matches that stink and they always lose. Talk me through this meeting and how it was pitched to the guys. How was Hawk okay with this, and how did Animal feel about it?
Hawk was okay with it because, frankly, it was a real life situation that he had been going through, and he was trying to deal with it and get over it, and felt that kind of bringing it public and making a story out of it might help do that. And he wasn't against it. I don't think that it worked, and I think that it was maybe another example of not mixing real life with entertainment. It's tough to do.
We'll cover it in long form when we cover the LOD, I'm sure. Now, the next week is the first Sunday Night Heat, and it's taped here with Shane McMahon as the host, and Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler are doing the announcing. Why did it make sense for Shane to be the host here, do you think?
It was time to get Shane out there and be able to get Shane on air. Vince felt that he would make a good on-air character, trying him out in different roles and getting Shane exposed to the company. I felt that he would be a good on-air host. Young was the look he was looking for, he being Vince.
TV Guide did an interview with Vince on July 25th for the August 15th wrestling cover story. What was the vetting process for Vince McMahon here? Was this when you guys were kind of filming it so you could make sure he wasn't misquoted and you could combat it if the narrative was different, or is this before the paranoia set in?
It was essentially at this point to be able to get our story out there. And if we can control the narrative a little bit more, then you try and control the narrative. And if you found people that were willing to come in and not be doing a hatchet job, then he was open to do it. So they were few and far between. If you go back, it was a hot time and people wanted Vince. And Vince was more about pushing the talent. But at this point, Vince was one of the hottest talents on the TV. He was one of the hottest characters. So we had to get him out there.
One of the hottest shows on TV was MTV Celebrity Deathmatch. And they report here that on September 24th, they're going to have Austin versus McMahon on the show. Meltzer would write, interesting, because in MTV voting from the viewers of the show, the match they really wanted to see was McMahon versus Bischoff. Do you remember there ever being any sort of conversation about there being a celebrity death match with McMahon versus Bischoff?
That's what they wanted to do, they being MTV, but that was something that we would not even consider. And if MTV wanted to do business with us, then it was pretty simple.
Yeah.
Austin McMahon. Hottest thing on TV.
Meltzer wrote, on the WWF website, they're asking women that attend live shows to take off their tops when asked. In case there was any doubt, the woman who flashed on Raw was the same woman who did so on the Canadian house show swing a few weeks back. Is this a rib? Did you guys really go on your own website and ask for people to show their boobs?
No, we didn't ever. I would love to see him actually show that proof and go back and show where that happened. That's a fabrication on Meltzer's part, kind of like the rest of his reporting.
Well, I tell you what, we're showing boobs right now over on our Facebook. It's facebook.com/something to wrestle. And you'll see Sable right there with the handprints. And we asked, you can not only vote in the poll, but you can also ask us questions. We asked you if you had any questions about Fully Loaded 1998. We're going to hit a couple of high ones here, give you next week's poll, break some news, and then get right out of here. Sean on Twitter wants to know, why was Scorpio no longer Flash Funk? And at this point, why was he allowed to go back and forth between WWE and ECW?
People felt that ECW is a brand, and we were doing stuff with ECW at the time, that he might have had more marketability as Too Cold Scorpio. So call him Too Cold Scorpio.
Lots
of change.
Lots of questions like this from Jake Hicks. Whose handprints are those?
Fine.
Are you being serious?
No, they're nobody's handprints. They're just damn handprints.
Well, somebody had to do an outline to put them up there, did they not?
It's just beautiful handprints.
Okay, so you don't know. Thank you.
They're mine.
Okay, cool. What's funny is everybody's on here that's like the number one question on the whole
Do they
thing.
look like real handprints to you?
Whose handprints are these? This is awesome.
It looks like the turkey that you learn how to draw as a kid, the hand turkey.
I feel like that's a shirt. Adrian wants to know, who would have been the more successful adult film star, Val Venis or Jarrett's manager, Tennessee Lee?
Tennessee Lee all the way.
Here's a great question. James wants to know, how the fuck does Sable's tits beat everything else on the poll? We'll find out. Go to facebook.com/something to wrestle and it'll maybe make sense. Adrian wants to know, was Mark Merrow uncomfortable with this angle at all? I think that's pretty common. You know, a lot of guys would be uncomfortable with having their wife in this spot. Do you remember any of that?
Merrow was not uncomfortable. As a matter of fact, I think that Mark Merrow kind of took pride in the fact that that was his wife.
You know, what's interesting to me is you guys not only did this, but you showed slow motion replays of the slap, of the reveal. You wanted to highlight as much of the jiggle as possible. It's funny how gratuitous you are with it. Tyler has a great question. Who came up with the term puppies?
Jerry Lawler.
Lots of questions about Lawler as to whether or not his reaction was genuine. Did he know ahead of time what this was, or did you guys want a surprise and to get his real reaction?
Yes, Jerry Lawler knew ahead of time.
This is great. Jason Walker says, what would John Laurinaitis make of Sable's chest?
Cowabunga, dude.
This is amazing. Join the conversation right now. We want you to go ahead and vote on our poll and also ask questions for whatever wins next week's poll. The first way to do that is to like us on Facebook. It's facebook.com/something to wrestle. That's facebook.com/something to wrestle. We're going to go ahead and give you next week's poll. But first, before we do, I want to ask a question, Bruce. I wonder about Sable now, present day. I know you're not there anymore, but you were there after she had left. She sued the company for sexual harassment. We've briefly touched on that before. But now with Brock there, it feels like there's kind of two reasons the WWE doesn't talk about her. A, because of the prior legal issues in the past. And B, it is your world champion and one of the most badass dudes in the locker room's wife. They don't highlight this moment. They don't talk about this moment. It's kind of been swept under the rug. It's still there on the network for you to enjoy, but they don't feature this anywhere. Is that based, in your opinion, mostly on the legal ramifications or respect for Brock Lesnar?
I think it's more based on the change in attitude, change in direction of the company being geared towards more kids, trying to be more kid friendly. I think that people know where they can go get it. They can go see it in the archives, and it may be out of respect to Brock as well. But I think it's more geared towards the programming that they're trying to present now.
Well, let's tell you what we're doing right now on Facebook. So if you've been paying attention the last couple of weeks, we're trying to just grow our Facebook to spread the word about our show and expose it to a new audience. We're still on Twitter. He's at Bruce Prichard. I am at Hey, it's Conrad. You can follow along with the show at Prichard Show. But the poll is on Facebook. So go vote right now in this week's poll. We're going to give you the topics, and we've got a special announcement about our 1-year anniversary and a contest right after this. Poll topic number 1. Are you ready, Bruce?
I am ready.
It's SummerSlam season. We've got a SummerSlam poll for you. And next week, poll topic number 1 is SummerSlam 1990. We've briefly talked about this on the Warrior episode and on the Rick Rude episode. This is the main event for the world title in the steel cage. It's also Earthquake, Hulk Hogan, lots of cool stuff going down. SummerSlam 1990. What might we talk about if that wins the poll?
Well, we're going to talk about simply the making of the Ultimate Warrior, Vince's desire to crown the Ultimate Warrior as the man in the WWF and putting him in the spotlight as the champion with his first big title defense in the big spotlight here with Rick Rude. And also going on, my favorite, Macho Man Randy Savage, The American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, baby, live and in living color, one of my favorites of all time.
Poll topic number 2, we're keeping SummerSlam on there, baby. SummerSlam 1995. Certainly a low point in the company at that point, 95. Not the banner year that a lot of people want it to be. What might we talk about if SummerSlam 95 wins the poll?
Well, that huge main event, Diesel versus King Mabel, and it was a build-up where we had Mabel. That's right, Big Fist, be the king of the ring to get his title shot at Diesel. But also on this card was one of the greatest matches of all time, Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon in a ladder match for the Intercontinental Championship, as well as the debut of one Isaac Yankem, DDS, facing none other than the hitman Bret Hart. And those of you that don't know who Isaac Yankem is, it was the first appearance of Kane facing.
Lots of fun stuff there. Hakushi's on the card. 1-2-3 Kid, the Blue Brothers. We got Barry Horowitz on a pay-per-view. Alundra Blaze, Bertha Faye, Kama, SummerSlam 95. Criminally underrated as far as fun talking topics. Maybe not the best show, but certainly we could have fun talking about SummerSlam 95. SummerSlam 97, we are right here at the 20-year anniversary. All of these took place around this same time of year. But SummerSlam 97 is one that I think a lot of people are probably looking forward to hearing. What might we talk about if it wins the poll?
Man, this is the big one where Steve Austin had his neck broken in a match with Owen Hart for the Intercontinental Championship. This was the match. Almost completely changed the course of wrestling history. In addition, Bret Hart and The Undertaker with Shawn Michaels as the referee goes down as one of the all-time greats ever in the business.
And the first match on the card is Mankind and Hunter Hearst Helmsley in a steel cage match. This is where we see the genesis of Dude Love. Lots of fun stuff to talk about if SummerSlam 97 wins the poll. Last but certainly not least, let's keep it going, man. SummerSlam season is upon us. SummerSlam 2000. What might we talk about if SummerSlam 2000 wins the poll?
Oh, hell, the main event. The Cat versus Terry. No, that wasn't it? Okay.
It's a
main event.
That's a stink face match, in case you're wondering. So that's pretty good stuff. But we do have the main event, though. Rock, Triple H, Kurt Angle, all in the main event. We've got a 2 out of 3 falls match with Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho. We've got Jerry Lawler taking on Taz, Chyna and Eddie Guerrero taking on Val Venis and Trish Stratus. We've got the Right to Censor on the show. We've got Shane McMahon working a match with Steve Blackman. Kane and The Undertaker are working again. And then probably what most people remember most of all about this show is tables, ladders, and chairs for the tag team titles with Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys, and the Dudley Boys. This is an underrated show, and any of these would be worthy of a win. Bruce, if you had to pick, which one of these do you think would be the most fun show for us to cover next week here on Something to Wrestle?
I'm going with SummerSlam 2000.
Well, how about that? I would not have guessed that. Me personally, I'm hoping 90 or 97 win. I loved both of those eras. I'd love to talk about either one. But frankly, I think any of these are going to be entertaining. You get to decide, though. There's only one place to vote. The poll is up right now. Cruise over to facebook.com/something to wrestle. And that's what we're covering next week. And here's another reason to go like us on Facebook and take a look. A few weeks back, we actually put up a contest and we said, hey, we're going to pick one person who shares this post to spread the word about our Facebook. And we're going to let that person get a couple of shirts, get a couple of koozies that we don't sell. You've got to see us at a live show to get those. And we're going to send you some. And we're even going to let you pick an entire poll. All 4 topics you'll pick. We've picked a winner, and the winner is announced right now at facebook.com/something to wrestle. So if you want to pick a whole poll all to yourself, go check and see if you won right now on Facebook, facebook.com/something to wrestle. So we're going to give that person's poll next week here on the show. And we've getting lots of questions about, hey, what are you guys going to do for your 1-year anniversary? Believe it or not, Bruce, it's almost been an entire year since we've been doing this show. Our very first episode was on the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and his time in the WWF. That happened on August 5th of 2016. Our show this year is going to air on August 4th, 2017. So we're going to call that our anniversary show, and we're going to do something special. We're going to put video of the show up on Facebook. So go find us on Facebook, hit the like button, be ready. You'll get to vote in this week's poll. You'll get to ask a question for whatever wins the poll. You get to see if you pick what is on next week's poll, all 4 topics. And the following week, tune in. You're going to get to see us do the show live on Facebook. Check it out right now. Facebook.com/something to wrestle. Bruce, is there anything we should mention besides our appearance this weekend in Philadelphia? We're going to be at TLA. We've got an extreme surprise for you. You don't want to miss out. And it's right there in Philadelphia, TLA. One place to get tickets, of course, it's livenation.com. You'll see Bruce and I right before Battleground. It's 2:00. Tickets are only $35. Come join us. Have a great time in Philly. Anything else we need to hit, Bruce, before we get out of here?
Bro, that is it. Don't forget RGT for Law. Don't forget all of our friends over at BrucePrichard.com. You need a mortgage, go to SaveWithBruce.com. That's pretty easy. And by God, let's take it on home. And of course, Simply Safe, our sponsors this week. We also want to thank.
I also want to give a shout out to Go Pro Wrestling on YouTube. They've done a phenomenal job helping us with some of our research. I can't plug them or promote them enough. If you want to find some fun, interesting interviews with other wrestlers and kind of a peek behind the curtain, one place has it. It's youtube.com/GoPro Wrestling. Go vote right now on our poll on Facebook. Hit the like button, throw down your vote, see if you get to pick next week's poll, and we'll see you next week right here on Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard.